So that's what I'm gonna do. Let me just check the YouTube. I am live on the YouTube. I'm gonna make this kind of a public thing since I only have a couple people here, but people from Patreon will be able to come in live and stay on here because I'm streaming it from the YouTube. Let me just double check it real quick. I think we're good to go. One second. All right. So yeah. All right, so we are live on YouTube. I'm going to do this kind of, and again, just for this class, kind of to promote it, but everybody that's on the Patreon will have access to come in, ask classes, and kind of gives people um, an idea of what we kind of do in these classes. Um, Gives them kind of a sneak peek. I may not stay live the whole time, but just to give people an idea. But hold on one sec, just checking one last thing. I think we good. Yeah, we're good. All right. What we got there? Hold on. Why am I not seeing that? Where is not seeing. All right, there we go. All right, so that's what we're gonna do. So this is Egyptian Hermetic Alchemy Class 5 here on the Patreon. For those that have joined recently, like I say, with all, well, actually, let me hit the record button on this. Hold on, almost forgot. All right, there we go. Almost forgot that. That just happened before. Yeah, this is Egyptian Hermetic Alchemy Class 5. For those that are newer members, this applies to you. Again, with these ongoing series, you need to make sure you go back and watch the other classes prior to it because sometimes it covers material on information you might have questions on that we addressed. So always go back and catch up, more so for newer members. Now, if you've been on the Patreon, some of you guys been here for years now, 5, 6 years. So it probably doesn't apply to you, but if you've joined recently in the last year, few months or weeks, you got a lot of catching up to do, right? Even with all the other ongoing series, that's why I always say this in the beginning of the Patreon classes because there's enough stuff on there to keep you busy for years, and that's not even an exaggeration. Okay. So, in addition to the personal work that you guys do, um, yes, I know you got to fit this in, and I know everybody's got busy lives, everybody's got busy lifestyles. Everybody's got a lot on their plate. But as I've said before, because I get people that reach out to me and always tell me that this, that, and the third. But like I say, guess what? Join the club called Life, and you're not the only one going through it. And again, as I always say, managing your time is magic itself. So you're just gonna have to figure out a way to navigate through that. And that's just the way it is. And like I said, nobody can say they don't know what it is they should be doing. Because on the Patreon, we're covering every topic. The foundational pillars of the occult, which I refer to as demonic integration work, shadow work, and ancestral veneration. So you guys need to make sure you're staying up on that and you're doing the work. That's your foundation. Incorporate your personal work outside of the Patreon in there. And this is why we have all these different topics and classes archived and we do this. So this is for people that want to take their path of self mastery to the next level. Now, if you're just cool sitting on the sideline, being an observer, then that's your choice, that's your business. but the Patreon page is designed for those that want to actually, get in the game, not just sit on the sidelines, do the work, because nothing is going to change in your life if you're not doing any type of spiritual work, ritual work, incorporating consistent spiritual practices, etc. If none of that stuff is being done, then I can just tell you nothing's going to change in your life. Doesn't matter how many books you read, how many classes you take, how many groups you sign up for. It just means you've obtained a lot of knowledge, you've read a lot of books, and you've been in a lot of classes. That's all it means, right? The goal of the Patreon page is for each and every one of you in your own personal and unique way to gain results that manifest change in your life on what I call the 5 points of self mastery on the Patreon page. Mastering yourself spiritually, first and foremost, knowledge of self, mentally, right? Mentally is being in a sound mind, strong. Remember, your mind is the foundation, it's the root of your soul. There's an old saying, mind your mind for the jewels of your soul. So if they can captivate your mind in the wrong way, if they can indoctrinate and program you, they could steal your soul. They don't want to take, see, we always link the soul, especially people who are not on the occult and the left-hand path. We always try to link it into some spooky, mystical, religious nonsense. The powers that be, and I shouldn't have to explain, you know who I'm talking about, any individuals that have an agenda for control and power and money, and that's all. A lot of people fit that category. Their goal is to control your mind, your thought process, the way you think, the way you feel. And once they can do that, they can steal the very essence of your life force, your soul, right? So mental, being in a sound mind and sound body and spirit is important for the very essence of your soul. Also emotionally, a lot of people are not harmonized within their emotional seats. They're controlled by their emotions, and your emotions can either uplift you or they can devour and destroy you. Okay. Especially when you have no type of control over it and you're just a purely reactive individual. People who have no control over their emotions, they just react. And that's part of the indoctrination program that they've been working. And I told you guys again at the end of last year, and just to put it out here for people on the Patreon and for those here in the room for that are Patreon members, do not miss the end of the year, New Year class that we'll be doing at the end of next month. That's the only class I do every year where I don't get on any public platforms and talk about communications from entities, spirits, gods, and demons. That's the only class I do it in, and I do it in a private setting. And there's a reason for that. Every year, those messages come through strong, and I relate them to you guys only in that class. I do not do it on YouTube, never have, never will, but I only do it for the members who really, again, want to actually take that information, apply it, and grow. And there's a lot. In the last 3 years, we've seen what has happened. Those that know. Those that may not know, you just may not be aware. Maybe you are on your own, personal level. But those that know. And we got a lot of work. In that class, I will also reveal who the patron deity we will work with for 2026. For those that are not on the Patreon and might be watching on YouTube right now, we always, for the last few years, and we will continue that, whatever spirit presents themselves as the Patreon, patriarchal or matriarchal deity for the year, that will be who we work with. And it has revealed itself, and I will reveal that at the end of next month. For those that are finishing up, we have one more month for the set workings. We've worked with set this year for the entire 2025 year, which was the year of set or the year of nine. Some of you guys have sent me your feedback and kept me abreast. Some of you have done the work the entire year. It's a lot of work. Listen, in addition, I get it because I get the emails all the time about how tough it is and how busy it is to stay up. I don't know what to tell you on that. I don't have an answer for that, right? All I can focus on in regards to that is myself, and just like you guys are going to have to manage and make money for make time for what you need to make time that's important in your life, right? I get it, but in 2025 going into 2026, I'm busy and I don't have time is not an excuse anymore. That shit went out the window years ago. Okay. So if you don't have time and you don't know how to make time to feed and nourish your soul and spirit, then that's on you. You can't blame anybody for that. I don't know, again, what the answer is because I don't know everybody's personal situation. I get it. Some people work in multiple jobs. Some people are running businesses that take a lot of their time. Some people have professions, skills, and trades that take a lot of their time, in addition to raising kids, raising families, and dealing with personal and family problems. I get it. But guess what? Like I said a few minutes back, welcome to the club called Life. Come on in and figure it out. I'm not gonna, you know me, if you know me over the years, I don't coddle nobody. I'll show a certain level of empathy, but that's about it because we need to all stay strong and we need to keep navigating through this path because there's a lot of shit coming down the pike. And we're only seeing the very beginning of what's getting ready to happen. And again, I'm gonna elaborate, more on that as we get into that class for next month. Hold on one sec. Why is this? Let me just double check over here. Oh, no. Why did it do that? Here we go. All right, let me just check over here. Make sure everything's good there. All right. And I will try to go back and forth again for those that came in. I'm doing something I've never done before. This is actually a live Patreon class, just to give you guys an idea of kind of what we do. So I'm kind of dealing with the people in the Patreon class. I will look at the chat here and there, but I just want to give you guys an idea of what we do. All right. So having said that, I think we kind of covered and navigated through that. I think you guys kind of get the idea. Hold on one sec. I don't like doing this on this at all. There we go. All right. Usually do it through the live StreamYard. All right. So if anybody on the Patreon, type anything into the chat, questions when I get to it. Also, if anybody wants to come in live when we get to it. Now, the Hermetic philosophy, we just to touch on, I want to make sure you guys have the centenary edition, the hardback one, right? There's the paperback one, there's the free PDF. It's not the same. The hardback one has a lot more information in the front of it. It touches on a little bit more in depth on some of the principles. So I want to make sure most people have that. Also, we're going to be starting to tap into make sure you have your copy of the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, the Atlantean. There's many different people have put the translations out of it. They're for the most part very similar. But I'm using the one by Maurice Doral. That's the one I want you guys on the Patreon for the class to have. So again, I want to put that up there. Again, it'll be there for the recording. Please don't type into the chat what book that is. That just disrupts the flow of the class. Have those copies on deck. We have been going through the Alchemy for Personal Transformation, the Emerald Tablets of Tehuti by Dennis William Huck, and we've been going through the 7 operations of alchemy. Now, the science, what I'm trying to show you guys out the gate in this, using those 7 operations of alchemy, as we talked about and we alluded to, but I'm going to go a little more in depth. Those are the key steps into doing correct shadow work, right? Because alchemy is to transform oneself, right? That's the goal, right? When you're reading about the Philosopher's Stone in ancient Egypt, I'm going to go a little bit into, the Emerald Tablets. When you're reading about the Philosopher's Stone, that's you, okay? The temple you're trying to perfect is you, right? The message that Hermes, who in his manifestation later, right? Because one thing we have to be clear on and understand, like people still are confused, is Hermes, Tahuti, and Thoth, are they all the same entity or are they different? They're different manifestations, but the same entity. Now, people get confused with this. We kind of elaborate a little bit on this in the 8th annual Journey at the Black Adept Conference, right? People get confused because they'll read something in a book where it says they're the same being, But then they get confused because in the appear the stuff that they're reading on the surface almost appears as if they're three separate beings. And that's why you hear one of the terms is thrice Hermes, right? And the Emerald Tablets. So Tahuti and Thoth also understand the etymology of words and the language, right? What also tends to happen is in different cultures, different titles and names were given when these entities would reincarnate. Well, or they would incarnate and manifest at different periods of time or realms. What we also have to understand is each and every one of you stop separating yourself as if you're different from these spiritual beings. You're not. It's just we have lost the formula to have the ability to incarnate at will. Now, the reality is your goal, and what people fail to realize, the one question that probably going back to when we started to become aware, we should always, and probably have been for a while, asking the question, how do we get here? Why are we here? Where are we going? What's going to happen to me when I transition on, etc. Right? That's all confirmation. If you're asking yourself those things, that's confirmation you are a divine supreme being. There's some people who never ask themselves that because they're so caught up in worldly bullshit and low vibrational frequency shit that they're just living their life reckless, so they don't care. So if you're an individual who's asked yourself those questions, and that was one of the motivating forces that motivated you to seek knowledge, then that's confirmation you are one of those divine beings. You've just lost the formula on how to do what they do. So what I teach people is don't separate yourself as if you're inferior to whether it's the Egyptian Neteru, whether it's the Orisha, whether it's the infernal gods and goddesses, such as Lilith, Samael, Lucifer, whether it's any of those beings on any of those pantheons, they are all manifestations of what you are, right? And this is why I say you are all of those things, and all of those things are you. You're activating aspects, like when you're activating, we use the term energy, when you're activating Lucifer energy, when you're activating Tahuti or Thoth energy, you're activating something that naturally exists within you, right? When we say that they're entities or energy beings, or you'll even hear the term etheric beings, right? Or Ethereans. You see this term in many different occult schools. I've mentioned to you guys many times before, the Rosicrucian order refers to them as something coming through what they call the etheric cord, which I found very interesting at the time when I went through the temple degrees. And it's trying to show you energy as we know, which is basic, elementary, middle school, ninth grade, high school science. Energy can't be created or destroyed. It can only be manipulated, right? So if we keep using the terms that these beings are they're beings of energy and light, you'll hear some say, so are we. You come from that same source. You're not disconnected from that source. So what does that also tell you? If we're beings of energy and light, they are, and energy can't be created or destroyed, that's confirmation you have always existed. It's just when you incarnate and you're vibrating at a low frequency in this physical body that you are present now, that you look in the mirror and the shell that covers the etheric body, you've been fooled into thinking that that's you, that that's really you, right? We've just lost that formula to speed up our vibrational frequency and be able to travel the many different quote unquote astral realms, plural, right? When we get deeper into like the clip path, we plug into that and show how there's just never ending possibilities of this. It's just, it's never ending. So Egyptian Hermetic alchemy is to remind you of who and what you are, but it's also to teach you the science and the spiritual aspects of how do you get back to that state, right? We hear many different, we've read it in many different books. We've heard many different people give classes and lectures over the years and, using the term that we are God, we are goddesses. And when I hear people say I'm a god or I'm a goddess, I like to pick people's brains, not to be judgmental, but I like to pick people's brains to ask them what in their own definition, right? In their own words, describe to me what that means to them. Because people always give the superficial answer that they read in a book, right? So when people use that term, and to those that might be religious, let's just clarify something. When that term is used, I'm a god or a goddess, please do not correlate that to the spook sky daddy god mentioned in monotheism. That's not what we mean when we say that. So a lot of religious people will have problems with that when they hear a person say, well, I'm a god or I'm a goddess. Oh man, that's crazy. That's blasphemous. You can't say that. Well, if you are measuring that to your sky daddy spook god in monotheism, then you're going to get lost and confused. That's the problem, right? That's not what it means to be a god or goddess. And I always use the story to religious folks who don't get it. It's the same thing that they attack Jesus for. And all you have to do is go into the Gospel of John, the 10th chapter, and he addresses that shit. And I don't want to get too much into the religious thing and, the whole Jesus and God being the same thing and the Trinity and the triune God. That comes later in the teachings of Paul. That comes later in when the councils of Trent and Nicaea came together. That's modern day Pauline Christianity. That Trinity shit comes way later. Jesus never claimed, there's nowhere you can find other than people misinterpreting what he said. He clearly made a separation between him and the Father. I don't want to get into that because that's a whole nother class for a whole nother time. What I do want to point out, though, real quick, is that whole God concept. So if you read in the 10th chapter in the Gospel of John, when the Pharisees are pretty much attacking him, you say you are God, right? Because he would say statements like, when you see me, you see the Father. So people misinterpreted that he was saying he was God. I always say this, real simple to bust that up. Matthew 6, the Lord's Prayer. Who is he praying to in Matthew 6? Revelations chapter 1, verses 1 and 2. The book of Revelations is given to Jesus by the Most High. It's clear separation, right? So if Jesus is God, who is giving him the book of Revelations in Revelations 1? I can go on, there's way more. Many times he made many different separations. I'm just giving you a couple of quick ones. The only place, again, you find the teaching of the triune God and the Trinity is in the first letter of John, which is first letter of John 5:7, where it says there are three that bear record in heaven as one, the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. And again, when you do the research, you will find that is not in the original text. The church fathers added that later because they had to have something in there to substantiate what they were pushing. Right? But anyway, that's a story for another time. But in that 10th chapter of the Gospel of John, 34th verse, when he was being attacked, he says, is it not written in your law? Right? Now, mind you, Jesus was a so-called Jew. He's separating himself from these so-called Jews that he's talking to, so they couldn't have been of his own. He said, I come to my own receive it to me not. But anyway, what is he referring to when he says, is it not written in your law that ye are gods? He's referring in the 82nd chapter of Psalms, specifically verse 6, but read the whole chapter. It's a short verse. It's a short chapter. It's like several verses, like 8 verses, I think, or 9 verses. But it says in the 7th verse, when King David is saying this to the children of Israel, but ye will die like men, which makes it clear he's not talking about some spook deity, right? What is he referring to? Because the 2nd chapter of Genesis tells us in the 7th verse that God breathed into man the breath of life and man became living souls, including women too, right? So the very essence of the creator resides within you. So this is what he meant clearly when he said, when you see me, you see God, not I. And first of all, it makes no damn sense that an omnipotent, omnipresent, and omniscient God would have to incarnate in human form to come down and lessen who and what he is to save something, humanity, and from salvation and give them salvation when he was the very one who was responsible for creating this hot mess in the beginning. Makes no sense. Just use common sense sometimes to get past the idiotic ideology that a lot of religion teaches. But anyway, what we're trying to show you here in the Hermetic Alchemy class, I don't want to get too sidetracked with religious dogma. Alchemy is about personal transformation. So what I want to go through a little bit tonight, I'm going to pull away, for those on the Patreon, I'm pulling away in this class. We're going to shift gears and we are going to go into the Kabbalion, right? We are going to go into the Kabbalion And we are going to get a little bit of history, origin of the book, which is not talked about. Who wrote the book first? Let's just talk a little bit about that. Well, it's drawn from teachings of Thoth or Tahuti. You can find a lot of those principles in the Emerald Tablets, but it draws upon 7 key principles. Now, if you go to the very back, just to be clear, because most people don't do the research, there's a section on page 145 about the author. And it says the identity of the 3 initiates has been the subject of much secrecy and rumor since the Kabbalion first appeared in 1908. So this work, which has become a foundational piece on the occult or the left-hand path. If you have any questions, first and foremost, with Patreon members in the Zoom room, just type them in the chat and I'll bring you guys in if you want to ask some questions when that time comes. This is a book I always refer to people first setting foot on this path. And I would pass that on to you guys if somebody comes to you. This is something we also addressed in the conference. If somebody comes to you and asks you, what's a good place to start? Don't make the mistake of giving people what you like. This is what people do. Because necessarily what you like may not be appropriate for the individual that might be reaching out to you sincerely because they want to learn, but you might fuck it up at that moment and give them the wrong shit. I've seen people do this. You might, because you like the tunnels of Set or the clip hop. You might make a bad mistake of trying to start somebody there. That might not be the correct thing to do, right? So the correct thing to do is feel people out, see what level they are on, and then that should give you a good idea of what you should maybe suggest to them. But having said that, in my experience, this is a great book you can suggest to any beginner. That's why I'm saying all that I said. Because understanding these principles and as they piggyback off each other, and we've talked about them on and off over the years here and there, but as they work in conjunction with each other and piggyback off each other, this really is the foundation of understanding how to work magic. I'm getting ready to prepare a class, and what my one live I'm going to do before the year is out is quantum sorcery and chaos magic. And quantum sorcery and chaos magic, once we go over that, that really is the sacred science of working what people would call high-level black magic. And when you hear black magic, stop thinking devil worship, Satan, Lucifer, and from a religious context. That's not what black magic is. I know people think that because they've been programmed and indoctrinated, again, through social media, through religious folks who are ignorant, to people who don't understand the occult and the left-hand path, or all the terms that are affiliated, which I more or less like to refer as the path of self-mastery. When you're saying black magic, you're just using the term black, void, the abyss. There's no limitations. It's the power to tap into your subjective universes and subjective realms, right? That's where one must go to manifest things to obtain results. See, when you're programmed to work in that construct of 3-dimension of person, place, or thing, that's what keeps you trapped on low vibrational frequency shit. And this continues to keep us in a state of non-remembrance, right? Because a lot of these entities that we are working with, spirits, beings, gods, goddesses, archetypes, whatever word floats your boat, that we are working with, we have to have the ability, first and foremost, we must understand that ourselves before we can understand them. See, people want to tap in and work with all these entities, and they don't even understand themselves. And that's why I always refer to that saying that everybody is so familiar with, that's inscribed above the temple in Heliopolis in Egypt, which is what we know as modern day Memphis today, right? It says, know thyself, and thou shalt know the gods. What's the first line in that? Know thyself. So how can you know the gods or the goddesses if you don't know yourself? So if you just go jump into some hardcore work, working with entities and deities, and you don't know what the fuck you're doing, you're probably doing a disservice to yourself more than you're actually helping yourself, right? So it's very important that we understand it. Now, more back on the concept of the author. Let's go run through that real quick. All right. So the Kabbalion first appeared in 1908, and it's a very popular work here in the Western Hemisphere when it comes to occult and magic, right? The three initiates, and the speculation, it still is not 100% confirmation of where this came from. It is most likely one of the many pseudonyms used by William Walker Atkinson, a popular New Thought writer and publisher in the early 20th century. Born in Baltimore, Maryland in 1862, Atkinson became a successful attorney in 1894. Following a series of illnesses, he immersed himself in the New Thought literature. He soon became an important and influential figure within the early days of the movement, publishing magazines such as Suggestion, New Thought, and Advanced Thought, as well as contributing to Elizabethtown's The Nautilus. Under the aegis of his own publishing company, Yogi Publications Society, Atkinson ordered The Secret of Success, which in this part some of you may or may not have known, as well as many titles written under the pseudonyms, including Yogi Ram Chamraka, who wrote Science of Breath, which is another occult or spiritual classic. Now, you got to remember also to understand a little history and context of this manuscript of at that time. I mean, shit, we're still in 2026, and some people still are struggling to accept the occult or the left-hand path as a more common or mainstream thing now, and it probably will never fully be. But just imagine in the 1800s dealing with this type of information. So people might say, why the pseudonyms? Why disguising the name? Well, because of protecting oneself. You're living in a time in the 1800s and 1900s where just imagine that tolerance level, right? And it's still fucked up now. And here we are in 2026, a couple hundred years later, just imagine. So that's the reason for that. For those that may or may not know the history of the book. The Science of Breath Skull, there's a few works out under that name or that author or that pen name, Yogi Ram Chamraka. And yes, this has also been attributed to William Walker Atkinson. So just so you have that information. Now, also some of the other names that are supposedly, you might have seen some of these authored names. Magnus Incognito. It's a pretty cool name, huh? And Therion O'Dumont. So he thought these out. The Kabbalion is the most popular and enduring work published by Atkinson's Yogi Publication Society. An honorary president of the International New Thought Alliance, Atkinson died in California in 1932. So just a brief history of the text, because when you're using something, you should fully understand the origin and the history and the context of it, right? That's why I kind of want to run through that real fast, okay? Now, what I wanted to cover tonight here in the Patreon class is the Hermetic philosophy. We're going to go back to the introduction in another class because it gets into some things. So, you know me, I don't really have a set order to doing things. I want you to go to page 7, Hermetic philosophy, right? So these teachings of thought and Tahuti, and if I have time, I might want to get into one of the tablet 6 of the Emerald Tablets, the Key of Magic, which is a very important tablet for us. Now, one thing people forget with Tahuti or thought. Now, first of all, the names. Where are the names? Depending on what dynastic period you are referring to, thought comes more from the Hyksos dynasties, the last 46 dynasties of Egypt. And Thoth is a Greek name that was attributed to Tahuti by the Greeks. Now, we also have to understand the difference between the pre-dynastic Egyptians, and we also have to understand the difference between the last 46 dynasties, which are the Hyksos dynasties. And most people for years, mainstream basically teaches you about the last 46 dynasties of ancient Egypt. And the reality is, and I just want to make this clear, it's sad still in 2026 that people are debating the origin of who the ancient Egyptians were. And it shouldn't even be a debate anymore. I recently have posted a video, and I would refer you to who I would say on these subjects were great influential teachers to me. were ones that inspired me in this area of topic. Ivan Van Sertima, who to me is probably one of the most, he doesn't get enough of credit, in my opinion, especially since he transitioned on. I thought his work on the early presence of Moors in America, the whole Moorish breakdown and culture and how the Moors worked their way through North Africa, through Egypt into Spain and the Mediterranean. I mean, it's phenomenal work because it's influenced Western society, right? Now, the one thing that's interesting, when you have different invasions by different cultures, and this is just a reality and it's not racism, it's when Europeans invaded a country, they not only invaded the country, they killed and destroyed the culture. I just want to be clear on that. That's just facts. But when you look at, for an example, the Moors, when the Moors, for an example, came into Spain and they came into Sicily, you can still see nothing of the culture was destroyed. Okay. Nothing of the culture, they didn't eliminate the culture. They added to, contributed to, and uplifted the culture in addition to the knowledge that they brought. That's the different with different when different cultures invaded. So I would have you, if you, I know many of you are probably familiar with Ivan Van Sertima. I would, if you're not, check out his work, check out his books, check out his lectures. You can find a bunch of them on YouTube. His books are easily accessible to purchase. Whether you go to Amazon, you can find free PDF versions of them on Scribd, etc. I would also have you look at Dr. Delbert Blair's work on ancient Egypt. I would also have you look at Dr. Ben, obviously Dr. Clark. Certain aspects, as controversial as he might be, I would look at Dr. Malachi Z. York's work, despite you might have a personal opinion on how that all turned out. I don't want to get into that because that's controversial, but there is some work there that you might find that connects. And obviously, there's an influence there you will see from the previous three teachers. But I find Dr. Delbert Blair and Ivan Van Sertima, I point those two out because I don't think they get the credit that they're supposed to, in my opinion, get. And that's just my opinion. All right. So, just so we had a little history of the book. Now, the Hermetic philosophy in the Centennial Edition, I just want to make sure I'm using that. All right. So, the wording should be the same if you're using the regular. Let me see if anybody on Patreon. I'll get to the questions as soon as I'm able to. But let me check what this is technically a Patreon class. I'm letting you guys on YouTube kind of view in, but let me check with the Patreon. Any questions that you guys may have, or anybody want to ask a question, just raise your hand and I'll bring you in. All right. So again, if you're tuned in live, technically this is a Patreon class. I'm just kind of giving the YouTube people a peek into kind of what we do. So yeah, I don't see anything in the chat yet at this point. All right. Oh, Vega Monster does. Let's bring him in real quick. Hold on one sec. Go ahead, Vega Monster. You can unmute yourself.
What's going on?
What's going on, bro? You got my email earlier, right?
Yeah. I just shot you that a little while ago.
All right, I'll check. When I
Uh,
get off, we'll set a time. But go ahead.
cool. You made me think about this when you were talking about the Philosopher's Stone. It just made me think of crystals and whatnot. And let's say you're working with crystals when you do your work, right? And you're working with
Right.
uh like a raw form of it, like to say amethyst. Would that be a difference than if you're working with a polished form of it?
It's a different variation. It's connected. So it's not,
Hmm.
it's just like looking at, it's crazy that you bring that up. It's just like looking at one of the principles in the Hermetic philosophy called the doctrine of vibration, right? So all things are
Hmm.
connected. They're just varying degrees of the same thing. So this would apply here. Now, obviously, different stones, as you know, working with that on the path, and I know you work with stones, crystals, etc. They serve different purposes, right? So they're different in that sense, yes. Now, if you're talking also about the concept of like, for an example, in reference to yourself, I just want to make sure I'm clear in understanding what you're asking. You're talking in reference to yourself too, correct?
So yeah, I was kind of talking about it in both ways, you know?
Right. So I'm going to use in reference to self. It's like for the individual who is the philosopher's stone is like for the Mason that enters the Masonic lodge, for an example. When a Mason first, and I've talked, we've talked about this before in these classes. When a Mason first goes through his 3 degrees in the blue house, which for those that may or may not know, the first 3 degrees in the blue house, which are the only degrees in the blue house, because then it expands after that, is the entered apprentice degree, the fellow craft degree, and the master mason degree. So when you go into a Masonic lodge and you look in the east where the worshipful master sits, and you look to the left and the right, in the corner to the left and the right, you will see 2 ashlar stones that they call, right? That one is a rough ashlar, one is a smooth ashlar, right? So symbolically, when the Mason enters the lodge, they are a rough ashlar, meaning they have a lot of imperfections, right? Just like we all do. They have a lot of things about themselves that they have to work on. And there's a lot of things they need to correct to continue their spiritual journey of mastering themselves and gaining the knowledge, wisdom, and understanding that they need, to grow. So every candidate enters the lodge a rough ashlar, but the goal is to become that smooth ashlar. So this other stone that you look at on the other side is very smooth and has no imperfections. So it's symbolic and it represents it's no different like we're talking about here in Hermetic alchemy. When the Mason enters the lodge for the first time, they're entering as a rough ashlar. And they continue through their Masonic journey to smooth that ashlar out and perfect it. So, yes, it also ties spiritually into yourself, literally, and then spiritually into yourself, right? It's you're trying to become that polished or that self-perfected being. And that's what Hermetic alchemy is about. And I'm tying it in and using this example for this point of this question, which is a good question. I'm using the Masonic example because Masonry is heavily influenced by ancient Egyptian teachings, right? And that's a fact, regardless of its origin today. And I know it's been laid with a lot of overtones of Christianity and Hebrew mysticism, but the reality is there's Hermetic alchemical teachings via the Masonic Lodge. Okay. Anything else? I mean, did that
Okay.
answer your question, or is there something else you want to expound on? I
Yeah,
just want
yeah.
to make sure I'm the root of your question.
Uh, I guess I could expound on that a little bit. 'Cause I've been working with this like a raw amethyst for years now, and then all of a sudden the other day it was almost like if the amethyst told me, I guess you could say, like, yo, it's time to get a polished one.
Yes. So you have a literal stone, but there's something esoteric that you tapped into. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So now, for an example, use one of the Goetians, right? D. Carabia is one of the Goetians, right? And what is D. Carabia? One of the things he's known for, he's known for working with crystals and stones and herbs and plants. But what one of his sacred sciences is, and as soon as you said that, it made me think of D. Carabia. One of his sacred sciences, remember, the mysteries of magic and spirituality can also be revealed to you through crystals and stones, right? And I believe I could be wrong. I believe
mhm.
that came up for you in one of your readings, correct? I mean, I could be wrong. Maybe I'm tapping into something else, but there is that connection there, right? We always have to look for both sides, right? Because even in the Hermetic philosophy, right, there's duality to everything in this realm and the spiritual realm, right? So it sounds like to me you're tapping into the literal aspect of it, right? Even though like that message came to you that it has to be polished, I don't think it was just talking about literally that it had to be polished, right? It's talking that you're the very essence, soul, and spirit needed to connect with that aspect of it on a personal level, right? Because you can work with amethyst and connect ritualistically through meditation, right? You could be using it ritualistically for what amethyst stones can be used for to work on yourself, right? Because the thing with crystals, which people may or may not know, right? Crystals house energy, right? That's why people work with them. People sometimes don't pay attention into a lot of those mysteries going back whether we're talking about some of the ancient civilizations, or even in the Bible, where the Bible in Revelations refers to what coming down of heaven, the New Jerusalem, the crystal city, right? And there's a sacred science which people fail to realize, or you might even hear the term Merkaba, right? Is another term you'll see in some of the text. Now, I always tell people, because this is going to now shift a little bit to left field, when people talk about extraterrestrial crafts, 90% or more of what people label as that are not really extraterrestrial in origin. Because if somebody claims to have seen a craft or sighted a craft, it would not have normal propulsion. And I'm explaining to you why I'm saying it, because your crystal question connects it to that, as crazy as it might sound. It would not have any type of exhaust system. It would not have any similar movement as what we would label as an aircraft. Reason why I'm saying that, because a lot of these entities that we're talking about from other galaxies and other realms, they mastered the science of using crystals to house energy and to propose themselves to astrally travel to different realms. Let me explain what I mean when I'm saying that, so people don't get lost. If you do the research, and something I'm going to present that I talked about years ago and people may or may not know about and forgot, I just ordered it. Once I get it, I'm going to do a presentation on it. It's called the I Am America map. And it shows you the different vortexes in the United States and all across the world. Our planet has 162 magnetic grids on it, right? And there's the sacred number of 9. Now, I'm going to show you guys something that you may or may not know. Revelations, people think it's a religious book. It has nothing to do with religion. There's the sacred number 9 encoded in there, the 144. If you add those three up, everything is 9, right? If you go to the 12 tribe, it all breaks down to the number 9. Now, when you go back to those 162 magnetic grids, those are energy centers. So when they talk about a crystal city, they're talking about ships who can draw energy from those crystals or those grids. And this is how they're able to propose of themselves and travel. Now, I'm just saying this. I don't like to talk about a lot of personal, subjective things and what I've seen and what others have seen, because it's personal. It's very easy to identify movement. And I've seen, going back to the 80s and early 90s, and recently, as 6, 7 weeks ago, and I think I talked to some of you about it in the when we were doing the Al Qadr ritual. It's very easy when you see that the way they move. If you have seen it, you know when you're seeing something authentic that is not from here. By the way it looks, by the way it moves, because they don't need fuel, exhaust, anything that we rely on here. A lot of crafts that people have claimed to seen over the years is advanced military craft that they have just not revealed to the public. And I'll use for an example the B-2 stealth bomber. Before, when they revealed it, they were working on that stuff 20, 30 years prior to, even before they let the public know. So sometimes they call it what? Identified flying objects. That doesn't mean it's a craft from outer space all the times. Sometimes people are seeing the military experimenting and trying to perfect something they're working on, but it's very easy to identify. But why did I go there? You got to understand how my mind works. Sometimes it's going to shift to something that got nothing to do with what we're talking about, but it opens the door to something else. I'm using that example to go to show you how powerful crystals can be. Now back to what you said in your question, because you know how these classes go on the Patreon. That's how they go. That's how powerful it can be on a personal and a spiritual level. Now, they don't want us to know this stuff because there's healing in that too. I'm sure you've worked with crystals from a healing aspect. And I'm not just talking about physical healing. You can heal mental, emotional, and spiritual trauma, because energy carries vibration and frequency, and sound, vibration, and frequency create healing aspects within us on an internal level, which does correlate to physical healing, no doubt. But we're damaged, a lot of us, and man, and this current generation, a lot of people are damaged more so spiritually, mentally, and emotionally right now, right? And that's the goal. And if you remember, for all you guys here on Patreon, if you remember the end of the last year class, pay attention to those classes I've done the last couple of years. Those are messages straight from the spirits. I don't, like I say, I don't get into it openly, but I'm giving you that stuff because that's the information that you're going to need to build and activate your psychic self-defense. So the answer is, what is the solution to this, right? Everybody should want to know what the solution. The problem that I have with all these platforms and all these all these classes and this, that, and the third. Everybody talks about the problem, but nobody's bringing any solutions. And I don't think the problem is a mystery anymore. I think everybody's clear on what the problem is. I think the issue now is what techniques, what practices, what things do we now do to get ourselves prepared? Well, first and foremost, you must activate your psychic self-defense. Crystals help do that, right? One of many things. I'm not saying that, but that is one of many things. Because without that psychic self-defense activated, we're all prone to these spiritual attacks. We're all prone to these low vibrational frequencies that they're sending out that are damaging our 12 occult nerves. We talked about this at the conference too, and the 12 magnetic particles. And this is being damaged by radiation, ionized radiation. This is the worst shit you can keep in your ear at all times. Try not to sleep with this right near you because it gives off ionized radiation at all times. Now, I want to be clear as I'm talking about this. I'm not saying live your life sheltered because the reality is we live in a day and time where it's all around us. So you can't avoid it. You walk out your front door, you're affected by ionized radiation. You can't see it. When you use your microwave, you're affected by it. Your Bluetooth, right? And the question always comes up, can it be repaired? No. Once those particles are damaged, they cannot be repaired on a physical level, right? That gets into a whole nother science. My thing is by understanding this and putting up your psychic self-defense, you can prevent from being directly affected by this stuff. So there is a solution, there is an answer. Crystal activation is one of many, right? Your ritual work, etc. There's many things that can be done, and we've talked about, that in other classes. But anyway, anything else to your question? I want to make sure. I know we kind of went on a
No,
tangent
no,
there.
that's it.
No, but it's a good question.
That's it. Thank you, though.
Oh, good question, though. All right. I see something else here in the chat on the Patreon. I always wondered if more laws exist beyond the seven we know. I know we lost, this is from A, we lost a lot of writings and scriptures like the Library of Alexandria. Yeah, it's an excellent point. Yes, and we have. There's a lot of texts that they have, obviously, and they don't want to reveal. There's a lot of controversy. Obviously, the Dead Sea Scrolls that were found in the Qumran caves in Syria in 1947, which that fucked their whole game up with the 66 books of the Bible, because basically, like the councils of Nicaea, the councils of Trent, the Roman Catholic Church, they shit their pants because when they found those texts, it was their doctrine contradicted it intensely. So they kind of revealed what was in them. Yes, I know you can go online and you can buy some of the. It's all bullshit. I'm just going to be honest with you, right? Like for an example, I have here, which is debatable because the authenticity of it. Where is it? And I'm going to have these available for you guys for you guys that are. Hold on, I'm sorry. For you guys that are taking the esoterical occult Quran and Islamic study class. I did find a publisher, and I got a bunch of these now, and I'm going to make them available for you guys on Patreon. The Controversial Gospel of Barnabas, all 222 chapters. And this is the translation I was looking for because the ones on the internet, a lot of them are garbage because it's missing chapters, it's missing stuff. And as you know, we're going to be going intently into that in the esoterical occult Quran and Islamic studies class because there's controversy in the fourth surah of the Quran of was Jesus crucified or not, because it says in there in Surah 4, verse 157, he was not crucified, he was made to look that way. So did a crucifixion take place according to the Quran? Yes. Was it Jesus? Well, no, the Gospel of Barnabas explains exactly what happened. Now, there's a lot of debate of the authenticity of it now. So some people say it's very modern, it's pseudo, it doesn't line up, there's mistakes in there when it mentions the Jubilee, this, that, and the third. Part of that is true and part of that is false, right? Because they'll say the oldest manuscripts were translated out of Spanish and Italian. That's not true. That's what they're telling the public. Because in the many books that were found or scriptures that were found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, this was one of them. Now, I remember you guys may or may not have seen about a year or so ago, or maybe less, that big, that big debate with Billy Carson and Wes Huff. And I'm just going to keep it real. regardless of the bullshit that Billy Carson was saying afterwards, that he wasn't feeling well and all this other shit. I just think that was cop out. He could have very easily addressed those questions. Now that dude Wes Huff may not agreed with it, but that's not the point. But he just showed poor understanding and information and knowledge of the Gospel of Barnabas. Um, it is a very debatable topic, and most Christian scholars will say it's not authentic, and they have the right to say that. But there's bullet points you can easily come back with that. Now you can agree to disagree. Um, I would tell people to read, study, and research, and you come to your conclusion. Because let's just say the individual came to the conclusion that this was authentic, then there would be a huge problem with modern Christianity. And obviously, your hardcore fundamentalist Christian would have to disagree with it, because if they did accept any aspect of it, it would go completely against their current or modern day Christian doctrine that they follow. So I would say research it. But the Dead Sea Scrolls changed a lot of things. And now when you look in your modern day Bibles, for an example, the main King James Version and other versions go by 66 books. Then you have the Catholic Church, the New American Bible. The Catholic Church uses the Apocrypha too. They have 72 books in their Bible. There's that number 9 again, not a coincidence, right? Then you have the 66, which is still the 12. 1 and 2 is 3. 3 times 3 is 9. You will never get away from that multiple of 9 or nines. Trust me when I tell you, it's encoded in everything. There's a whole nother science to that. There's numerology, there is astrology, there's occult sciences. The Bible and the Quran is nothing but an esoteric encoded book. It's just most people don't understand it when it's interpreted, when religious men got their hands on it and turned it into a tool to basically control the masses, is what you're looking at. But yeah. All right. So I know we're kind of, yeah, I know. I see that. Well, that's what I'm trying to say. And no disrespect to the brother Rich, when I think he calls his channel now 363 Empire. It's not Black Magic no more, because in my opinion, nothing on there was ever really Black Magic. But again, I get it. It's for views. It's for, I don't really do my thing for that, right? As you see, I know that you go on those platforms and channels, they're getting hundreds of thousands of views, right? Because of the content they talk about. I don't really talk about mainstream stuff. So, you know, YouTube algorithm, they put out there what they want out there and what they don't. And look, I'm just going to be honest. It's not enough. I did a video on it, right? I didn't hold back. I'm not going to contain my tongue. I'm going to call for what it is. Personally, if it was me speaking on that whole Wes Huff, I think that's his name, Wes Huff, I can't remember, and Billy Carson thing, I would have redid that debate. If you wasn't feeling well and you was claiming this, that, and the third, I think you still got egg on your face. And I think you should have still, I would have respected more if you said, all right, I wasn't 100% from what he claims was going on at that time, which I'm a little skeptical on that. I would have reset that up again and had an intelligent, mature discussion. And at least, I mean, you could agree to disagree. That's cool. I don't know why people have so much ego and feel I got to come out on top looking like I'm superior, because that's your ego. I'd have been okay if both of them had a discussion, but the thing is, again, I think his name is Wes Huff, right? Hopefully, I'm not butchering that. I think that dude came strong. Whether you agree with what he was saying or not, but he was standing firm. I would have respected Billy Carson if he would have came with something and stood firm on it, but he didn't come with shit. That was my whole point with that. It's not a matter of liking one more over the other. I think the real thing, what I'm trying to get at is here, we need to have, intelligent, intellectual discussion. It's not so much, we're not going to, I'm saying it's not about agreeing or disagreeing, because the reality is we're all not going to agree on everything. So if you come into a debate thinking what I'm saying is everybody's going to agree with me when I'm done, fuck that, you're going to get your feelings hurt. It's not about that. It's about having intelligent discussion, opening up dialogue, and opening up people's minds to think, and let people make the decisions for themselves. Stop trying to force your influence on somebody because what you think you feel that that's the right way. That may not be the right way for you. It might be the right way for you, but it may not be the right way for somebody else. So my goal is what I do on my channel, what we do, I'm just trying to open up people's minds. I'm not telling you to accept this, that, the third. I'd be a fool to think everybody's going to agree with what I say. That's foolishness. If I can spark your intellect, whether you agree with me or not, whether you are in alliance with it, you're like, I'm down, I'm feeling it. It's even good if you say, I don't believe anything you're saying. That shit's correct. But at least I sparked your intellect. What I'm trying to say is don't take anything for face value, right? And this is part of taking responsibility. When I was talking earlier about when we say we're a god or a goddess, it's taking responsibility for your spiritual, your spiritual path, your spiritual sovereignty. You're navigating your journey. You're not putting your soul in the hands of somebody else, right? You make the decisions. You navigate the journey. You tap in what you need to tap in to grow. You don't just do things because everybody else is doing them, or it's the end thing to do right now, or everybody's doing it, it's hip, so I'm going to join the Mickey Mouse Club and be down with what everybody's doing. That's foolishness. Okay. And some people don't like that approach because you're not in with the crowd that everybody else is doing. So you're not a fit. I'm not going to mention a name, but check this shit out. I'm going to tell you, well, I'm not going to mention no names. And I'm not saying that to say, well, Benita, why do you say not mention no name, mention names? Because it's not important. But somebody had reached out to me and then I responded. And it was about collaborating to do something together. Let's put it like this. And then I had that person's, I guess you can call that's their manager, I guess that handles, their promote. The response I got back from their so-called management after the person almost agreed, oh, we don't feel your platform is really conducive to what we do, and it's probably not a good thing that we do it. That's that spooky shit. That's my point. Nobody wants to talk about real shit. So it's more about protecting your, and I'll tell you why I'm saying this. It's more about protecting your brand and your platform and your agenda, right? That's more important to some people than really sitting down and getting to the nitty gritty. So I say to fuck with all that shit. And I'm just going to be honest with you. I think, in my opinion, that whole thing with Billy Carson and Wes Huff, I think he ran from that shit because he wanted to protect his brand, right? I would have rescheduled that and I would have had an intelligent conversation. But again, I get it. It's about views, and some people do this shit for a living. That's the problem. Some people on YouTube all day throughout the week because this is their income. This is their life. This ain't my income. This ain't my livelihood. I couldn't give a fuck. Right? This is not what I do to make my money. I don't really make any money off of this shit. I don't get views like they get views and the amount of money they make off their view. Yeah, we all get that little AdSense check as creators. I get a little something off of this shit, but nothing near the level they do because I'm not concerned with that. I don't care about, I'm not worried about quantity of views. I'm worried about quality of views. Okay. So I understand my lane. I understand what it is I do and why I do it, and I couldn't give a fuck on the flip end of that. But at the same token, it says a lot to me when somebody will put their agenda over claiming if they have a platform that they're teaching the truth. That's my point. Okay. But it is what it is. All right. Anyway. All right. Let me see if there's anything. Just double check, make sure everything's streaming over here because here we go. All right. Yeah, all right. I'm just noticing some. Let me just real quick. Again, this is a Patreon class, so I'm trying to focus on the Patreon. But let me go to the YouTube chat real quick, see if there's anything in here. Just some greetings. I appreciate. Thank you, Mac 4896. Appreciate that comment. Angelo Rosini, appreciate you, brother. Jose, ancestral abundance. I do have Sicilian in my bloodline. I'm Sicilian and Lebanese. Yes, so I do have that in my bloodline, and I've openly talked about that multiple times. So I identify with both sides of all aspects of my culture. Okay, so yes, that is in there. Sicily, though, Sicily and Italian is not quite the same thing. Even if you're in them cultures, if you know the history. And even amongst the northern and southern Italians, there's a big, at that time, for an example, which people may or may not know, and this I always found interesting, and I learned as I was smaller. So if you understand the history of the migrations of other people here, especially like a lot of Italians that came in through Ellis Island, well, what happens, you'll find A lot of the names were butchered and messed up, the last names. And a lot of the Northern Italians who looked pretty much 100% European, they had lighter features, light hair, blue eyes, green eyes, etc. They would change their names on their documents to American names. So they would blend in. And there was a lot of uh, 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 um, between northern and southern times, there was a lot of battles that went on, a lot of hateful shit because the southern Italians looked, they were more of your darker Mediterranean people. And that comes obviously through the history of Hannibal and the Moors. And if you go to Sicily to this day, you will see, if you look at the Catholic churches, those were masjids. They did not change any of the Moorish architecture. Now, remember the story with Hannibal. Hannibal, if you look at where the island of Sicily is, it's a direct line from Sicily to North Africa. So at that time, Hannibal of Carthage felt like that island off the Mediterranean, off of the continent of Italy, he felt like it belonged to Africa. So he went there and took it. Hannibal was also a genius war general. Norman Schwarzkopf, who we're all probably familiar with during the Gulf War, he admitted that he was highly influenced by Hannibal's um, war strategies, and he used it. Remember, Hannibal, if you look at some of the battles and the wars Hannibal won and how he did it with less of weapons and obviously technology, it wasn't at that time. He conquered Carthage with elephants, right? We all know the story of Hannibal. But the people from Sicily are a direct byproduct of that. Even when you go to Libya today, when you look at the Libyans, there's a lot of mixture there with the Southern Mediterranean Sicilians and the Libyans. And that's where my background comes in. And that's what I'm connected to. It's not the same thing as your Northern Italians from Italy. It's almost like saying a lot of your Spaniards from Spain, that's not the same as a Dominican, a Puerto Rican, or a Cuban, because a lot of the Spaniards from Spain are European. That can also be in classification to some of your Asian, like you have some Chinese who are Caucasian, but then you have some darker Chinese who are darker skinned, have more aspects or manifestation of their neuromelanin, not their neuromelanin, because everybody has the neuromelanin. You could look at that with the Japanese, the Korean. It's the same process. And obviously that's due to the mixing of genetics and genes, et cetera. But anyway, I don't want to go into a tangent on that, but yes, to answer your question. All right. Anything else here? Uh, like the diagnostic 556, like the DT set number 9. Ultra Instinct says Rich be having too many shady characters on. Well, let me tell you this. I try to just peek into what people was doing. And I may or may not have mentioned this a couple of times whenever I had the time. I've paid money, put a super chat question, and he's deleted it multiple times. He won't take my question. He's had people on literally, and then sometimes I just do it because I want a dialogue. I'm not trying to go in there and start no shit, but sometimes I hear stuff that needs to be discussed, and it's 3 times. I've tried it over the last couple of years because I don't really have a lot of time to be sitting on YouTube. But I've peeked in and I've seen shit pop up in my feed, and then I'm listening. And then I literally paid $10 for a super chat. I see it go to the top and I'm watching his eyes, literally. I'm just gonna call for what it is. And I just see him bypass me, don't even take the question. And again, little shit like that tells me you're more worried about protecting the agenda, and the brand, and it's all good. Whatever. It is what it is. Everybody does their thing. So I get it. Everybody's got to make their money, do their thing. I stay in my lane, they stay in their lane. But I just see it's like mixing oil with water. They don't want to really fuck with it, but it's all good. It is what it is. All right. Let me see if I missed anything in here. All right. So let's go back. I want to get into a little bit. So we're talking a little bit. You see where this Hermetic philosophy can take us. And for those watching on YouTube, this is just a little sample of what we do on Patreon. I'm not really going in on a level like I want to because as you guys know, and I'm not just saying this because I'm not trying to use this just as a marketing tool. I'm trying to market the Patreon. Obviously, that's obvious, but I'm not trying to do that. Check out the class. Like I'm trying to, that bait and switch because I don't do shit like that. But I found out going back 4 or 5 years ago, YouTube has now really suppressed the algorithm. So there's certain things I won't really talk about or go into a certain level because, and what do I mean? How do I know? Like I'll do a topic that really is talking about something that is, in my opinion, not really that volatile, but they'll do stupid shit. Like not because I rely on it, they'll limit the what you call it, the ability to make money off of it. They'll say limited, it'll say limited availability, and it's not talking about anything, but it's talking about something that's not mainstream. So they'll limit monetizing the video. Not like I care, because like I said, I don't really make any money off of it. So I realized, and then they start putting in all these new policies, this, that, and the third. Now they got the altered content policy. Are you saying, for those that know, if you're a YouTube creator, you know what I'm talking about? Before you post your video, have you presented any content in any shape, form, or fashion that has been altered? You know why they do that? Again, I got to be careful what I'm saying now. It's because that gives them the right and the ability to deem what they feel is acceptable, mainstream, or not acceptable. You get my point. Okay. And for those that have a YouTube channel, that's something they added not too long ago. So now you have to check the box. Yes or no? Does this have altered content? So when you check no, which you have to do, because if you check yes, it's a whole nother process. When you check no, you've now given the right for them to deem what's altered or what's not or what's correct. It's like, want to hear some crazy shit? Instagram ain't no better. I did a post last year on Easter. Do you know Instagram blocked it saying that the content that I was talking about in reference to Easter is not deemed appropriate, was the term they used. You believe this shit? Because I'm not going to hold back on what I talk about. So my question was, I didn't want to waste my time. Obviously, I just deleted the video. I just be curious as what is the criteria they go by to deem what's appropriate or not? I know what it is. I'm just asking that, being sarcastic. But that's the point I'm trying to get at. That was what I was told when after I'd done film the video. It was like a short 15, 20-minute video on the origins of Easter and where it really comes from. It wasn't even nothing super deep or heavy. And then that's the message that came up. We had blocked your video because we deem it to be inappropriate and not in accordance with our standards. My question is, what are the fucking standards that are being used that is the so-called tell all be all criteria? That's the shit that kills me. I know it's politics. I know it's really the standards are it's not in accordance with mainstream or what people consider Easter is. I know what they're judging it by, but stop with the bullshit word games. You understand what I'm saying? But yeah, it's all bullshit. You get my point. All right. I want to get through this section here, and then I'll probably take some final questions. This is not too long at all. Introduction. We take the great pleasure in presenting the attention of students and investigations of the secret doctrines. This little work based upon the world-old Hermetic teachings. There's been so little written about this subject, notwithstanding the countless references to the teachings and the many works upon occultism, that the many earnest searches after the arcane truths will doubtless welcome the appearance of this present volume. The purpose of this work is not the enunciation of any special philosophy or doctrine. True occult science does not conform to any dogma. Let me say that again. True occult science does not conform to any specific dogma. You might see elements of other dogmas in it, but it does not conform to a specific dogma. Therefore, those that have a problem with occult sciences are usually those who are conformed to a specific dogma or religion. That's important to understand. And that's, again, one of the many reasons why this path is not for everybody. And I'm glad that that points it out here because it's very important as you navigate through and study, right? Um, where did I leave off? Here we go. The purpose of the work is the enunciation. The truth will serve to reconcile the many bits of occult knowledge that they have acquired, but which apparently oppose to each other and which often serve to discourage and disgust the beginner in the study. Our intent is not to erect a new temple of knowledge, but rather to place in the hands of the student a master key with which he may have opened the many inner doors in the temple of mystery through the main portals he or she may have already entered. right? There's no portion of the occult teachings possessed by the world which have been so closely guarded as the fragments of the Hermetic teachings. Now, we also have to understand we're using the word Hermetic, that's a Greek word, right? So again, I have to go back to something I was touching on a little bit in the beginning of the class. Remember, the Hermetic philosophy, the Greeks, I know the brother in the Patreon page mentioned the Library of Alexandria in Egypt. Well, yes, when the Greeks invaded Egypt, they invaded the libraries of Alexandria in Egypt, and they brought a lot of that knowledge back into Greece, back into Rome, and even the Roman Catholic Church, which they don't call it that anymore, and there's a reason they don't. Now we just hear Catholic Church, but it was actually always referred to as the Roman Catholic Church. And if you remember, especially if you grew up in the Northeast, I grew up in New York, and if you always looked in the front of the churches where they had their signs, it would always say the name of the church. It would say RC, R.C. Some of them might still have it. I don't really see it anymore. And that RC was abbreviated for Roman Catholic. So you got to understand the history, the Hermetic sciences, and something we refer to as the personal daemon, that they refer to the agatho daemon, the genius of the higher self. They got all that from Egypt, right? So Pythagoras, or whatever how you say his name, Pythagoras, whatever the fuck his name is, he did not discover, he is not the father of mathematics. He just uncovered something that the ancient Egyptians had already mastered. That's just fact. Anybody that doesn't agree with that got a personal issue, right? Anybody that's still debating and arguing the authenticity of the original Egyptians being ancient Nubians is ridiculous, right? But people are still trying to avoid that. And usually that's that racism that people are dealing with because they don't want to deal with the facts. I don't care what your ethnicity, what your race is. If we're still having that kindergarten discussion in 2025 going into 26, this shit is ridiculous. So we must understand the Hermetic philosophy comes from the pre-dynastic Egyptians. That's facts. Okay. And it can easily be confirmed by doing your history. Why do you think Napoleon Bonaparte smashed the face off of the Sphinx? Why? Because the Sphinx, when you look at the original Sphinx before they smashed the nose off of it, it clearly is the face of an African man. You can look at the carvings on the walls of Imhotep. It's clearly an African. How do you know the reason why they smashed the nose off of the Sphinx? Because if they didn't want people to see it, clearly was depicting a Nubian African. It's facts. Because the nose is one feature that separates the ancient Nubians and Nubans from other races, because it's very distinct. But that's something that's portrayed today as health. Oh, dark skin or Nubians, or they have the broad noses and the big lips. They try to use that reverse racism psychology. But those were features that made those people completely different from every other race. So Napoleon did that shit because he didn't want nobody to see what they look like. Now, I remember Dr. Ivan Van Sertima saying that because apparently they have the actual fragments of that in the British Museum of Ancient Egyptian History, which is crazy how the fucking Brits got control of all this shit. But apparently Egypt was renegotiating with them at that time, to try to get the original fragments back. I don't know if that ever happened or will happen, but my point is we must understand the Hermetic teachings come from the pre-dynastic Egyptians. We also must understand ancient Egyptian philosophy and culture has more of an origin in what we know as Aswan, Sudan, also known back then as Nubia and Nuba. There's more pyramids in Sudan and Aswan than there is in Egypt itself. And just look at the history and the origins of the deities such as Bes and Ptah that have their origins in Nubia and Sudan and migrated their way back down into what we call ancient Egypt today. Bes is a pygmy deity. That goes back to the original pygmy deities of Africa. That goes back to your Neolithics. I don't know if you guys know what the Neolithics are. The Neolithics were the people that occupied the Nile region before there was any Egyptian civilization there, before there was any pyramids in Egyptian culture. The Neolithics were known as the Pygmies and the Watusis. The Pygmies were known as small individuals that stood from about 4.5 feet to 5'6", 5'8", right? And then your Watusis were your that was 7 feet tall or higher. Yes, there's a lot of basketball players that are Watusis. Right? Remember the song "Walk Like a Watusi"? Right? That was used to be a song back in the 70s. Right? So this is why you see everybody's in that height range between 4.5 feet. Now I want to get into pygmies and dwarfs. I guess into a whole nother thing, but that's the average height. These were your Neolithics that occupied the Nile Valley before there was Nile Valley civilization. And nobody talks about the Neolithics because everybody likes to first and foremost go to ancient Egypt because of the majesty and the glory and the beauty of its culture. And it is, no doubt. But let's remember that even had its origin from something that predated it, which were these Neolithics, right? Nobody likes to talk about that period because there's no, I'm going to say there's no glory in it, but it's not vainglorious like everything that's connected with Egypt. So they are byproducts of these Neolithics, right? And then you can get into, look, I know when we do these Patreon classes, they get a little fucking bizarre, not in a bad way, in a good way. Now you're getting into your when you get into like the ziggurats and the step pyramids. Now you got to go the connection in ancient Egypt with the Ogdoads, right? These are your water bands, right? These were your individuals. A lot of people would refer to them as reptilians, but some of these bands, right? They stood. Some of them were of this height that I'm mentioning, and some of them were of the shorter height. Now you could even go to the Dogon in Mali and West Africa, the same thing. They believed too there that there were beings that came beneath the surface of the water and came to land. And as it's recorded in some of their writings, in exchange for them coming to the land and integrating
Hey,
with their
did you
women.
buy? Why are you always calling alcohol?
Hold on, you got to mute your mic there. Hold
Stop
on, who's
saying
that?
that. Who was you on the line with?
All right, somebody, I just muted. Make sure your mic is muted when you come in, please. All right. So they have recorded in there that these beings came from beneath the surface of the water and they mixed with the women of Dogon or Mali in West Africa. And in exchange, they would teach the tribe of the Dogons or the Malians the mysteries of the universe, astrology, the sciences, creation. Now, you can Google this and pull it up yourself. The ostrich people that exist in Mali today, they have webbed feet. You can pull up pictures of it on the internet. So you make that conclusion, but they say that's a byproduct. Now, every 60 years, in the doggone reenactor rite called the Baldo Rite, go look it up, where they reenact this every 60 years to commemorate the story that I just told you. So this is something in their culture. So there's traces there, whether it's Egypt, whether it's the Dogon of Mali in West Africa, there's connections there of what we're talking about. But no, this is the pre-dynastic Egyptians. This goes back before what we know as the Hermetic philosophy that the Greeks basically stole from Egypt. And then this is something pomegranated by, or I should say, pushed by the last 46 dynasties of Egypt, which were the Hyksos, right? And as I said before, stop getting confused with that word because the word Egypt or Egyptos is a Greek word too. The name of that land is not called Egypt. That's a name that was given later. They were called Egyptos because it means burnt. The sun would burn their faces. So when you're saying an Egyptian, that's the title that was given to the Hyksos dynasty or the Hekakasut, the shepherd kings, as they were referred to, because they were Indo-Aryans and Greeks that came into Egypt and invaded and mixed with the original Nubian Egyptians, producing what we know today as your modern day Egyptian slash Arab. And this is why they vary in different who's. You can see some Arabs who look very dark skinned and can look like they have more of a North African origin, or some look very European, right? It's no different. That's how genes and genetics work. But know that this comes from the ancient Egyptians on back to the Neolithics. And it's important that we know that history because some people stop at a certain point because they tend to want to connect and identify what makes them feel good. And that's not what it's about. All right, let's continue on. There's no portion of the occult teachings, is where we left off, possessed by the world, which have been so closely guarded as the fragment of the Hermetic teachings we have come down to know as the 10 centuries, which has elapsed since the lifetimes of its great founder, Hermes Trismegistus, right? Hermes thrice, right? The scribe of the gods who dwelt in old Egypt in the days when the present race of men was in its infancy. Contemporary with Abraham, and if the legends be true, and an instructor of that venerable sage, Hermes was and is the great central sun of occultism, whose rays have served to illumine the countless teachings which have been promulgated since his time. All the fundamental and basic teachings embedded in the esoteric teachings of every race may be traced back to Hermes. Even the most ancient teachings of India undoubtedly have their roots in the original Hermetic teachings. Now, let me add this real quick, okay? Now, I know they always referred to Tahuti or Thoth as the great recorder or the scribe, which he was. But how come they don't attribute another thing that's very clear and he is identified with? He was also a master of magic. And that's why the 6th chapter in the Emerald Tablets, Thoth the Atlantean, he goes into the science of sorcery and magic. So he was much more in depth outside of being a great scribe and recorder. Yes, he was, no doubt, because that's there. But how come the magic and the sorcery, how come Heka, which in Egypt is magic, how come Heka is not talked about in a lot of these mainstream platforms? Like Egypt is not enshrouded in sorcery and magic and high levels of spirituality. It's always just in my opinion, the surface stuff. Right. Go ahead, Vegamon, so you can unmute yourself.
So my question is, it has to do with something that I've been hearing, a term that I've been hearing pop lately. I never really heard before. Maybe I just skimmed over it or whatever, or never heard it. But everybody talks about we're gods and we're goddesses and whatnot, and like you say, like all the spirit really just look at yourself as don't see these deities or these spirits and whatnot as outside of yourself, right? But have you heard people talk about meta gods? Because I've been hearing that a lot lately. I'm just like, so okay, so I don't ever hear anybody say, well, I'm a meta god or I'm a meta goddess. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm. Right. Now, when you say meta god, to be honest with you, I haven't really heard that term. What do they mean when they say that? Because I know they just make definitions up.
Okay,
So when you
so
say meta god, what does
I'm
that
gonna give
mean?
you an example. I'm gonna give you an example. Like for example, one of them that I heard was Shavoy, right? Is the meta god of the Clipoth, and so basically every deity in the Clipoth would be just a component of that meta god. That's just one example. There's a whole lot more.
Right. But the term meta god itself, I get that part. But the term meta god, how, if someone went to give a definition, what is a meta god? What does that term mean?
I don't know the exact definition itself, but the way that I see it is it will be like a Voltron. You know what I'm saying?
Okay. Like kind of like, all right, that's kind of what I was figuring. But if they're saying it in regards to that,
Yeah.
right? And then how you just correlated it to the clip hop. It's personal. It's subjective. You can interpret anything the way you see fit. That's going to work for you. I can see how, like you say, as when you use that example as the clip off and being fragments. I get that, but really, in essence, that can be applied across the board to many things. So just what it sounds like to me, because I'll be honest with you, I never really heard the term or paid attention to it. Maybe I have, and I just haven't paid attention to it. Um, Based on what you described, as I said, that could be done across the board, but it sounds like to me somebody just dug deep into something and kind of gave up, kind of gave an explanation of their interpretation. And it's not a matter is that right or wrong, because obviously it's how that individual tapped into their personal path. Because remember, for an example, it sounds like to me, in my opinion, that's a form of chaos magic. And the reason why I say that, remember, chaos magic incorporates any system. It's not governed or aligned with any specific spiritual system. And that's the beauty of chaos magic. The individual can draw from one or many systems and create a personal spiritual path, philosophy, or system that works for them. So I would look at a concept like that, in my opinion, and I'm just basing it on what you're saying and that you know. It sounds like a form of chaos magic or a chaos magic approach. And look, I've always said this. If you're utilizing something and it's working for you and it's creating results, so if an individual, say, is using that approach and they're getting results, power to you, right? It's if we look at it and maybe we don't fully grasp or understand it or understand it or overstand it, it just may not work for us. Or maybe it's just, something that we don't resonate with, and that's fine. But that's what it sounds like to me. Based on what you're saying.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, because just subjectively speaking, I've been in spaces where, I mean, just things just they just keep going, and just like, for example, like, let's say a small example would be like the shadow work never stops, right? Or like the alchemy stops. Uh, so if you were to look at a god compared to what they're describing as meta gods, then I'm thinking like, okay, well, like I compared it to Voltron, well, then there would have larger Voltron for all these Voltrons. You know what I'm saying?
Well, now if you're using the Voltron analogy, what does Voltron do? What is he known for?
Uh, Basically, everybody comes together and they create Voltron.
Right. So it's pulling from different sources, different fragments, Voltron
Mhm.
activate, and yes, everybody comes together and pulls and becomes a Voltron. So I could see they're using that term meta, that term they're using because it's pulling from those different fragments. So again, it comes off to me as a chaos concept or approach to spirituality or magic, and that's fine. I actually don't have a problem with it. If a person is using that and they're drawing upon it and they're using it spiritually and ritualistically and they're getting results on their path, power to you. That would be my answer to that. It doesn't matter if somebody might be hearing this right now. And I'm saying this from somebody not fully conscious or aware of this, because I always am in alignment with the approach. If it's working for you, knock yourself out. It doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. It doesn't matter what anybody else's personal opinion or perspective is. That's irrelevant because it's at the end of the day, there's going to be many things in your path and our paths that work for us, and somebody else just may not resonate with it, and vice versa. We might come across and will come across many people on our path that they're doing things that you're like, I'm not really getting at, I'm not really understanding it, and I'm not really feeling it. But that's irrelevant because if it's working for them, it's working for them and it's real. So, I mean, that's kind of just how I would approach that.
Okay, cool.
All right.
Thank you.
Yep. Yep. All right. Let's try to get through the rest of this and then we'll finish up with some questions. All right. So we're getting a little history of the Hermetic philosophy, the seven Hermetic principles, the connection to the Emerald tablets. I don't know if we're going to have enough time to get to that. I do want to try to get the sixth, which I don't think it's a long one. It might be. I could be wrong. Actually, I'm wrong. I think I'm wrong. Six is quite long. Yeah, we're not going to be able to do that. Yeah, not too long. Eh, we'll see. I'm not going to rule it out, but looking 50-50 at the moment. All right. So we left off, we're in the second paragraph, page 2 in the introduction. So it's not limiting the teachings to Hermes, to Huti, or Thoth, just to Egypt. It's saying this has been influential to other places, including India, right? From the land of Ganges, many advanced occultists wandered to the land of Egypt and sat at the feet of the master. From him, they obtained the master key, which explained and reconciled their divergent views, and thus the secret doctrine was finally established. Now, Manly P. Hall wrote a whole book on that you might be familiar with. Um, from other lands also came the learned ones, of all whom regarded Hermes as the master of masters, and his influence was so great that in spite of the many wanderings from the path, on the part of the centuries of teachers in these different lands, they may still be found at certain basic resemblance and correspondence. which underlies the many and often quite divergent theories entertained and taught by the occultists of these different lands today. The student of the comparative religions will be able to perceive the influence of the Hermetic teachings in every religion worthy of the name, now known to man, whether it be a dead religion or one in full vigor in our own times. There is always a certain correspondence in spite of the contradictory features, and the Hermetic teachings act as the great reconciler. The life work of Hermes seems to have been the direction of planting the great seed truth, which has grown and blossomed in so many strange forms, rather than to establish a school of philosophy which would dominate the world's thought. But nevertheless, the original truths taught by him have been kept intact in their original purity by a few men in each age who, refusing great numbers of half-developed students and followers, followed the Hermetic custom and received their truth for a few who are ready to comprehend and master it. From lip to ear, the truth has been handed down among the few. And that's why I've always said many spiritual so-called secrets are passed mouth to ear. They're not written down anywhere. And that's why a lot of spiritual traditions that have certain degrees or have certain levels of initiation, it's even the same thing, for an example, in Ifa. A lot of the books you read on Ifa, if you've not been through it and initiated, it's bullshit. Especially books on Palo, pure bullshit. Okay? It's just surface information to kind of, I don't want to say throw the person off, but to spark their interest, but it's not, it's like an example, I keep it even more simple. I love people I run into who think they know about masonry and they've never been initiated in a Masonic lodge. That's so funny to me. Yeah, well, I read the Duncan's ritual book. So what? That doesn't tell you shit. You're just getting the foundation and the body of the degrees. That's not telling you exactly what goes on in the lodge and in the initiation, but you have fools that read books like that, the Duncan's Ritual Book of Masonry that anybody can get. And now all of a sudden they're scholars on masonry, right? You see these idiots on the internet, these religious people who will say stupid shit like masonry is the devil, this and that, and they'll use all these so-called correlations that they think that they're making, and they too have never been in a Masonic lodge, and they don't know anything about it, and other than they're drawing their conclusions from what they think they know and what they have heard or what they're seeing on the internet and what they're seeing on platforms because they're spooked out. My thing is, you can't speak on it if you have not gone through the degrees and experienced them, because then you're just speaking on hearsay. And you can't make a statement, 100% statement that you're claiming is fact when you have no authenticity to prove it in a matter like that. And I'm saying this because I've been through Blue House, Red House, been through the Royal Ark, okay? Been through the Scottish Rite. And 90% of the shit that people talk about does not go on. Yeah, they ride the goat there. You don't even know what the term riding the goat means. Some people think people have no term. People just talk out of their ass. It's just like people who sit there. I love people that put videos out on the Illuminati. And now my first question to them is, were at some point you a member of the Illuminati? I'm not talking about all the conspiracy shit. Kanye West sold his soul to be an Illuminati. You motherfuckers are so goddamn spooky and scary. If you think real Illuminati is that, and if you think entertainers such as, you're confusing that with other spiritual systems where they make pacts. It ain't got nothing to do with anything connected to the real illuminated ones. The real Illuminati or Illuminates or Illuminati or the illuminated ones is a sacred order that goes back to the masters who are seeking illumination. And what's the illumination they're seeking? Knowledge, intellect, right? You're confusing that bullshit with the Illuminati that was formed by Adam Weishaupt in 1776, who was from Germany, right? And these are the people you're talking, the Rothschilds, all these influential people over the years, the Rockefellers, right? Yeah, these were people that goes back to the Sacred Order of the Owls, where they made pacts to sell their soul, and that's not a real Illuminati. That's that conspiracy shit to throw you off. Trust me, Jay-Z, Beyonce, Kanye, all these people that I see people posting on the internet, they're in this sacred Illuminati. No, they're not. And I'm telling you this from experience. If you haven't sat amongst the illuminated ones, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Trust me. Okay? I see this with all. I see people talk about OTO and Crowley's order. Don't know what they're talking about. Okay? It's just, again, there's a disease running rampant on the planet called ignorance. And a lot of people are suffering from it. Okay? So don't get sucked into that bullshit. Okay? All right. So we're almost there. We left off here. All right. So yes, a lot of this was passed mouth to ear. That's where we left off. And as I said, there has always been that elite group, that elite few have kept these teachings sacred, right? So despite all the bullshit that goes on, there's still, that still exists. All right. There have always been a few initiates in each generation in the various lands of the earth who kept alive the sacred flame of the Hermetic teachings, and have such always been willing to use their lamps to relight the lesser lamps of the outside world when the light of truth grew dim and clouded by a reason of neglect. And when the wicks became clogged with foreign matter, there were always a few to tend faithfully to the altar of truth upon which was kept alight the perpetual lamp of wisdom. These men devoted their lives to the labor of love, which the poet has so well stated in his lines, "Oh, let not the flame die out, cherished after age. In its dark cavern, in its holy temples, cherished, fed by pure ministers of love, let not the flame die out." These men have never sought popular approval nor abundance of followers. That's how I would describe myself. They are indifferent to these things, for they know how few there are in each generation who are ready for the truth or who would recognize it if it were presented to them. They reserve the strong meat for men, while others furnish the milk for babes. They reserve their pearls of wisdom for the few elect who recognize their value and who wear them in their crowns instead of casting them before the materialistic vulgar swine who would trample them in the mud and mix them with their disgusting mental food. But still, these men have never forgotten or overlooked the original teachings of Hermes. Regarding the passing on of the words of truth to those ready to receive it, while teaching it is stated in the Kabbalion as follows: where fall the footsteps of the master, the ears of those are ready for his teaching open wide. And again, when the ears of the student are ready to hear, then cometh the lips to fill them with wisdom. But their customary attitude has always been strictly in accordance with the other Hermetic aphorism also in the Kabbalion. The lips of wisdom are closed except to the ears of understanding. These are those who have criticized the attitude of the Hermeticists and who have claimed that they did not manifest the proper spirit in their policy of seclusion and reticence. But a moment's glance back over the pages of history will show the wisdom of the masters who flew the folly of attempting to teach the world that which it was neither ready or willing to receive. And that shit still goes on today. The Hermeticists have never sought to be martyrs and have instead sat silently aside with a pitying smile on their closed lips while the heathen raged noisily about them. In their customary amusement of putting to death and torture the honest but misguided enthusiasts who imagined that they could force upon a race of barbarians the truth capable of being understood only by the elect who advanced along the path. And the spirit of persecution has not yet died out in the land. There are certain Hermetic teachings which, if publicly promulgated, would bring down upon the teachers a great cry of scorn and revilement from the multitude, who would again raise the cry of crucify, crucify, meaning if these teachers, if some of them became mainstream in public, religious people would be out of business because it would contradict a lot of the bullshit that they've been promoting on us for a long time. In this little work, we have endeavored to give you an idea of the fundamental teachings of the Kabbalion, striving to give you the working principles, leaving you to apply them yourselves. Remember, path to self-mastery. If you are a true student, rather than attempt to working out the teaching in detail, if you are a true student, you will be able to work out and apply these principles. If not, then you must develop yourself into one, for otherwise the Hermetic teachings will be as words, words, words to you. Notice this path, and that completes that. Notice this path is a path where you have to do work. And if you're not, knowledge not applied is knowledge not learned. Notice what it said there. If you don't apply this knowledge, it's just what? Words, words, words. This is why we have a lot of people on this path who read books that galore. I read this book. Oh, yeah, I got that book, blah, blah, blah. And they can regurgitate book after book. But they can't apply any of that information or knowledge in their life. And then it just becomes pointless, or as it said there, words, words, words. So as we navigate here on the Patreon and continue, we will go through those principles in depth and detail. We will unlock the mysteries of the Emerald Tablets and how we can apply that to our spiritual life on a daily and a regular basis, if you truly understand. And it's going to show you that these teachings are timeless, right? You can't put a time frame on it. And one thing that it pointed out in there, which I thought was important, regardless of what faith, dogma, religion, or spiritual system that you have, these principles apply across the board. And that's the beauty of them, right? That's the beauty of them. It's undisputable because it's wisdom. Wisdom cannot be confined to any particular dogma, any particular spiritual system or religion. Wisdom is just that. Because when somebody has wisdom, that's the actual product of applying the knowledge. So a lot of people have knowledge, but they don't have wisdom, is my point. Okay? So if you just have all the knowledge, but you can't apply the knowledge, it means obviously you have no wisdom. Okay? So that's very important to understand. That's very important to know, because if we don't look at it in that context, we're going to get confused. We're going to get misguided. Okay? Let me check here. So having said that, what time we got? All right, 10:17. We'll go through 6 in a minute. Let me see if we got any other questions. We got a couple things in the chat. What else we got? So let me go to the Patreon chat here. Says, this is from A. Tahuti came down to give us the tablets in Egypt in the Greek pantheon. Prometheus came down and gave humans fire. This means Tahuti and Prometheus are the same person, just in a different time in pantheon. Now, that could be a personal revelation that came to you. Is there anything there that can be documented to support that? No. But remember, as I've said in the past, if you can make a synchronization with something and it works for you, because it's not so much is the synchronization factual or literal or not in the sense of being documented, but if you've drawn something from that you've connected with and it's helping you grow, then I would look at it in that context. Okay. Now the next question, this might be a stretch, but I'm going to say it. Prometheus came down to give humans fire in a way. Oh wait, let me just read that. In fire in a way, this Tahuti Prometheus coming down from a spiritual place of mind to bring information to humanity or heart. Yeah, again, that would also apply to what I just said. And I'm kind of in agreement with that, because I see the correlation that you're making. I see the connection. I see how they are synchronized. And it's very, obvious you can make that connection. So yeah, I don't have any problem with that. I think that's something spiritually you can draw upon. And you will see that happen a lot over the years in different cultures, different manifestations of deities, and you could see that strong connection. So yeah, I can definitely see how you're piecing those two things together, and I don't even have a problem with that. All right, let me go to the YouTube chat real quick. And again, if you've just tuned in, is doing something for the first time tonight, just to give people an insight kind of what we do on the Patreon page to a degree. I can't do the full thing here openly. But for you guys, for those that are tuning in, I just figured last minute, this is one of the last classes of the year. So let me do a little open thing on YouTube. So maybe people who have been thinking about joining the Patreon page, maybe this will give them an idea of what we do. So just as you see, it's done on Zoom. We have a live discussion. People come in, and this is kind of how we go in. All right. So let me see. Let me go through the YouTube chat. Let's see what I can get to, time permitting. Thank you for the. I just saw this here. I'm sorry, Joel Thompson. Thank you for the super chat. I appreciate it. Thank you. I want to make sure. So I guess just going back a little bit. Ultra thing. Billy made a whole video making excuses. Yeah. So if you came in late, we were talking a little bit earlier. It came up about the whole Billy Carson. I think Wes Huff. I think that's his name. I can't remember. Well, I'm pretty sure it's Huff. Maybe I have the first name wrong. I agree. I'm just going to call it for what it is. I was talking about that earlier. I think it was a lot of excuses. And then I think the real pathetic thing shortly after that, he got on, I'm sorry, it was kind of funny to me. He got on same dude, Brother Rich's channel, and Phil Valentine was there, and there was some other people there. I can't remember who. And he broke down and cried that, oh, he wasn't himself. And what really happened was he got taken out of this dimension and he almost didn't come back. I was like, I can't listen to this shit. It's a bunch of horse shit. But yeah, long story short, bunch of excuses. Not to keep talking about it because it's not really worth talking about, to be honest with you. The only thing, like I said, what came up was the only thing that the Gospel of Barnabas debate. Like, you looked foolish. First, you said it was the forgot what Bible he said it was. Then he said, no, not one that Bible. So he referred to some so-called ancient Bible. And then he said, no, it wasn't that. I was referring to the Gospel of Barnabas. And you're talking to a dude, a Christian scholar, who did his research, obviously. And that motherfucker did his research. This book right here. He pulled it from. So, and then you're using a term, you're labeling yourself the most outstanding what did he call himself? He labels himself in that video and other videos the most outstanding scholar on ancient scriptures and papyrus and tablets in the world today. When you're giving yourself that title, do you know the door of scrutiny you're opening yourself up to? And then some dude comes with a little argument about the Gospel of Barnabas, and you didn't know the history of the book. You didn't know the origin of it. You couldn't even go to the chapter and it's clearly in the 222nd chapters, when you go to last, actually 219 and 22, where it talks about, because his whole thing of referring to that was because it says in there, Jesus wasn't crucified, which he was right, but he couldn't even take him to where. So how are you going to reference something when you don't know where to take somebody and show them your point? All right, enough said. Whether people like it or not, and it's not a personal thing, it's not a dislike, it's not a black or white thing. And I saw some people turn it into a black or white thing. Why? Because a white guy made a black guy look bad, we're going to turn this into a race thing? But what if Billy would have shred him up? Nobody would have brought up race, right? Let's just call it for what it is. At the end of the day, they had nothing to do with race and didn't have nothing to do with like or dislike. It had to do with two men having a discussion and one man obviously knowing more of what he was talking about and the other man didn't. That's all. It's just that simple. But anyway, we'll not waste time on that. All right, let's continue. What else we got in here? Brother Jack. What's up, brother? Yeah, Jack made it down 2 weeks ago to the conference. It was good to get you down there drumming. Hopefully you can come back, brother. Ultra tells you everything you need to know. Yeah, all right. Reference to the Billy Carson. What to do games. Man, you guys be killing me with these names, man. Your avatars. What to do games 8757 piece just came across your channel. Fire. Thank you. I appreciate that. Diagnostic 5616. Your questions is probably too deep for Brother Rich. He's mainstream and fluffy. Yeah, and I get it. But you know the other thing? He is now. Remember who was one dude that I mentioned earlier that was very instrumental in putting him on and bringing a lot of good notoriety and publicity to his channel, Dr. Delbert Blair. And the sad thing is, I don't really see him keeping his memory alive like that, right? If you know, remember, if you go back a few years back, remember he wouldn't even show his face on camera. So what happens is these dudes, they start feeling them good about themselves and this and that. Now it's become like you're talking about, it's very commercialized. And look, like I said, I mean, it is what it is. I'm not knocking, and everybody's entitled to their criticism. And I'm sure people will have criticisms about me, and it's all good. But the reality is, that's why I was saying earlier, it's become about the fluff, the mainstream. But it wasn't always like that. I mean, you go back and you look, like I say, Dr. Delbert Blair was very prominent on bringing a lot of publicity to that channel. And I was fortunate in the last couple of years of his life where I had the privilege of developing a personal relationship with Dr. Delbert Blair. I had many, especially towards the end, when he was dealing with his health issues. I had the privilege of having many phone conversations with Dr. Delbert Blair before he transitioned on. So there's a lot of personal things I had discussed with, and I'll keep in my bony cage, as they say in masonry, my chest, because it's personal. And it's just certain things that I know and I'm aware of, and some things I'm disgusted that happened with Dr. Delbert Blair in the end, and the things people did, which there's shady people everywhere, right? It is what it is. And I just want to make it clear, just because you're on a spiritual path, like a lot of people will come to me and think they come on the occult or the left-hand path, and they find people here that sometimes are more shady that were in the church when they were in the church. Don't be disillusioned because somebody has a look. Like I laugh at people because they think because somebody looks a certain way, they'll say shit like they think that person's spiritual. Why? Because they're wearing a big ass ankh, or they're wearing some African beads and some big ass mood rings, and they got a cultural hairstyle and they're wearing cultural attire that makes them spiritual. That underneath all that shit, that person could be the biggest scam artist, hustler, dirtbag, low life piece of shit you ever met in your life, and you just don't know it. Don't go by that appearance. So what does that make me? I don't wear all that shit, right? So then what is that? I'm not spiritual. I wear bad t-shirts and I'm what? So a person that just dresses normal, they're not spiritual. Like it just amazes me how dumb people are and the bullshit that they fall for. But that's like I told you, one of my things, and one thing I was saying here that the spirits told me when I first came on YouTube, they told me the day of the conscious pimp is over. And that's one reason why I'm here. The day of the conscious pimp is over. All these motherfuckers that are using consciousness and spirituality to pimp people, and I'm not just talking about sexually, because yes, let's be real, there are men who just come and they use the spiritual shit to get pussy. Let's just call it for what it is. Let's not sugarcoat it. And then there's spiritual pimps who pimp people for money, right? So don't be deceived. You got people who are fucked up all walks of life in every aspect of spirituality. Don't think you're going to come here and it doesn't exist, because it exists. It is what it is, right? Anyway. Twilight, sun, animism, that's the realest I've ever heard in a minute. Belief itself is magic. The more limited your belief, the less possibility is of magic. 100%, right? And it's funny that you bring that up. Not funny that it's funny. That question has come up a bunch as far as belief. People would always ask me, and I've had emails about this, comes up in classes. As people on the occult and the left-hand path, do we deal with beliefs? And I throw people off when I say yes. And then they pause. Not beliefs in the sense of somebody who's religious, who has beliefs in things not confirmed or things seen, but we have personal beliefs that we have confirmed through our work. That's a different type of belief, right? And personal belief is very powerful because when you tap into your subjective consciousness, that's very real to you. That's a different methodology of belief, not just faith and belief in things not confirmed or seen like religion promotes. That's a whole different aspect of belief. So no, we do not deal with that aspect of belief. But the belief that, where is it? Twilight sun animism brought up, yes. And that's a great term in correlation to that, to magic. And really, that's what chaos magic is. Again, I got to always go back to that. Again, I'm going to do, before the year is out, I'm going to do one more live at least. And I want to do it on quantum sorcery and chaos magic. And that's going to tie a lot of that concept in, which is, it's very important. All right. Let's go, Jeremiah. Hey, Rue Beniti, thoughts. I'm not sure what that's in relationship to. Did I miss something? If you're still here, I know it's been a minute, retype. I'm not sure what, I must have missed something. Let me go up. Did I miss something back here that you typed in? I don't see it. Yeah, I'm not sure if you're still here. If you are, reformat that question because I'll be honest with you, I'm not so sure what you're referring to. Jeremiah 13. Okay, so diagnosed singleton fair. How different were the Blue Houses Masonry lodges you were affiliated with versus the Dr. York Masonry Lodge? Did you learn any occult knowledge in Dr. York's orders AO Masonry? Okay, so that's a very good question. Now, I redid mine twice, so I'm gonna tell you why. Obviously, in early 2000, when we went through the lodge, or as we called it, the Egyptian Order of Masonry under Dr. York, his was more suited along the line of what we would call Prince Hall Masonry. So what do I mean by that? Now, we did something when I went through, there was the first few classes or groups that went through. I was in that first few groups. I did mine in the Temple of Imhotep up there in Georgia on Tamaray, as we knew it at that time. And at that time, we were still doing raisins as some Masonic bodies worldwide were doing. For anybody that doesn't know what a raising is, it's doing the 3 Blue House degrees in one night. It was crazy because it was basically a 13, 14-hour experience. It felt like we were in there for a whole day. It's not for the faint of heart. It's not for the mentally weak. We did have a lot of ex-Prince Hall Masons that came over, and which some people may or may not know. In a lot of those lodges, it's like a college fraternity. There's a lot of hazing. There's a lot of physical challenges. In addition, this is why I'm trying to tell you, people have no idea what you go through. But I can tell you, when you're talking about going through that, it was like going through a college fraternity. I'm not going to get into the details. It tested your mental, your physical, and your emotional fortitude. Now, the body of the degrees, it was sound just like it was in any other Masonic lodge, and I'm telling you what I'm comparing it to. And that was back in 2000, right? 2000, early 2001, late 2000, somewhere around that time. So I did mine the first time as a raising. I did my Entered Apprentice, Fellowcraft, and Master Mason degree all in one night. Now, again, a lot of the problem with you're going to find when you do research, York's Lodge that we were involved in at that time that still exists today, they're not recognized as a Masonic body by any official, like the Southern or Northern jurisdiction of the body of Masonry in America. Now, for what that's worth, I don't know. It doesn't really hold weight. But for an example, a member in York's Lodge, and I'm telling you this from experience, could not visit a registered lodge because they wouldn't recognize their membership. They would be considered a clandestine Mason because they're not considered an official body registered with any Masonic jurisdiction in the United States. Now, not only was I in the lodge, I served as a master over the Southern jurisdiction. I was the Grand Master over the Southern jurisdiction at that time, which basically handled south of Georgia on down, because I was down here in South Florida. So I wasn't just a regular member. I was heavily involved. I was a Grand Master, past master, the whole nine. After my separation, to speed it up, after everything that went down, I'm not going to get into all that, left, I redid my degrees in 2009 at Lodge 236 here in Florida. Now, the difference when you go through a registered body state, you're not going to deal with all that hazing. It's a bit different. They focus more on the esoterical teachings, but you're also going to find out every lodge has a different personality. So this is why I would encourage any brother that joins a lodge. All these lodges have what they call open meetings or open dinners where new candidates can attend the open meetings, talk to the brothers in the craft, and get a idea of the people, the brothers, and the personality of the lodge. In my travels to different lodges in the United States and outside of the United States and the Caribbean, every lodge has a different personality. Now, I'm going to keep it real with you. Some lodges have very old school dudes that don't want to change their ways and they're very religious. My lodge was more focused on the esoterical teachings whenever he did. So I did my degrees twice. The reason why is because anybody that goes through York's Lodge is not really considered, according to Masonic bodies in the United States or the world, they're going to be considered clandestine. Like you couldn't take your traveler's card. For an example, if you're a member in York's Lodge and say you wanted to visit a regular Masonic lodge, now when you visit a Masonic lodge as a visitor, they have somebody called, just like in the lodge degrees and in every lodge, there's a Tyler who guards the door with a sword. So if you walk up to a lodge, say, I'm a visiting brother, the Tyler's going to pull you aside. He's going to check your credentials. He's going to ask you some questions. He's going to even question you on the degrees. Well, first of all, your Masonic card is not stamped from the recognizing body of any Masonic jurisdiction. So you're going to be considered clandestine. You would not be able to visit another lodge. I mean, it's a lot of politics. So that's the difference. Now, did I learn a lot in there? Yeah, I'm not going to lie, I did. Is there a lot of similarities with what's considered recognized bodies of Masonry? Yes. So the foundations of the teachings were there, but obviously York connected it more to ancient Egypt. Other lodges do, but probably not on that level. So yes, I'm not going to say there was a lot to learn in there. Not going to say that. Now, not going to get in. There was some shady shit too. So I mean, it kind of goes both ways. When I say shady shit, as far as there were some parts left out on the degrees, whether that was intentional or by accident, I can attest to that. I'm not going to get into the specific moments because it's irrelevant. There's something we did call called paying wages on the second degree that probably is not done in a lot of lodges, and I'm not going to get into that because I took an oath not to talk about any of that stuff. But you will find every now when you look at main body of masonry in the United States, recognized bodies, the most known are three-letter Masons, which are free and accepted Masons, FNAM. You'll see that a lot, and that's probably the most recognized. You have four-letter Masons, which are considered ancient free and accepted Masons, AF and AM. Then you have international, and then you have Prince Hall, right? We all know the story of Prince Hall. Prince Hall was a Black man out of Boston who obviously he was a mulatto and started his own Masonic lodge. He wasn't recognized at first, and the struggle still exists to this day. Not all states recognize Prince Hall lodges as being official. Some do, but there still are some states, several out there that do not, and they're trying to eradicate that now and accept Prince Hall as an official 100% governed body in Masonry. Right? So there are states that still not to this day accept Prince Hall. A lot of them are trying to work, but there's still that racism that exists in Masonry too. So there was a lot of similarities, long story short, but yet some differences. But I looked at the upside to it. I had the privilege of experiencing both sides. So I did my Blue House degrees twice. And then I continued my Masonic study to this day. I'm still active. My membership is, but I don't go like I used to. So then I went on both sides of the spectrum. After the Blue House, I did the Royal Arch degrees or the Royal Arc degrees, and then I did Scottish Rite on the other side up to 32nd. And you have to be invited for the 33rd degree. Anybody that tells you they're 33rd degree Mason, I question that because you can't apply to be a 33rd. You have to be invited to do 33rd, and you have to meet a certain criteria. I don't know what happened there. Sorry about that. So yeah, that's basically what I would say with that. Okay. Without going on too long. What to do, James? Can you connect off with Pantanjali from the yoga tree? Again, like the other brother I was telling earlier, there's connections there, right? You can obviously see them in the teachings, whether it's the traditions, the philosophy. Now I want to go back to again what I said to that same question earlier. even though you may not find an official documentation correlating the two, but again, obviously yourself, like the previous brother, um, when he was talking about Prometheus, you can see you made the natural correlation. So I would say yes, on that surface, it's very obvious. There's the similarities, and that's all that matters. As long as the individual is making that personal connection and they're gaining wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, and it's helping them, it's changing them on their path, they're growing, they're getting results. That's a beautiful thing. And I'm not concerned. And I've said this. This is nothing new what I'm saying now. I've said this many times to a question like this over the years. If you've made the personal connection, and I'm not saying you or the other brothers asking it to validate it. You don't need anybody to validate it. You've made that personal connection. That's part. Remember, it's called the path of self-mastery. So you're not lining up your path specifically with anybody else's approach. As I've said before over the years, there might be similarities with what you're doing and others are doing, but we're all unique in the sense we're all having our own unique experience. We might all be trying to navigate and get to the same kind of place to master ourselves, but we all might be taking slightly different paths to get there. So all that matters is what you're doing is working for you. You're making that correlation and connection, and you're gaining knowledge, wisdom, and understanding from it. That's all that matters. So I could definitely see the connection, 100%. I would kind of answer that the same I answered that previous question. Yeah, there's a lot of Hotepas out there. There's a lot of Hotepas out there, and it's just become saturated and commercialized. Well, to Jeremiah 13, what's Heru's energy / archetype? Well, remember, archetype, let's be clear on this. When we say the word archetype, as I said before, an archetype is not just limited to what we would call a deity. A deity falls under the spectrum of an archetype, right? So I want to make it clear on that. A scripture can be an archetype. A movie trilogy can be an archetype. An archetype is a blueprint or data or information that represents something, right? So it goes beyond the spectrum of, I know we use the term a lot, and a lot of spiritual systems do. They put what we call deities in that space of archetypes, and that applies. Now, when you talk about, it's not just with Heru, when you talk about the energy that's represented to an archetype, it's the consciousness that they project. So we can take Tahuti for an example. His energy and what he represents as far as consciousness is growth and intellect, wisdom, understanding, the mysteries of magic. The same thing with Heru, but it's a little bit deeper with Heru. Heru represents the harmonization and balancement of our light and darkness, right? We can correlate that to the war with Set, which represents the battle between the lower self and the higher self. But there's an aspect of Heru that most people never talked about. It's his manifest as the hawk-faced Lord. It's his darker aspect, meaning after that battle, like symbolically the story when his eye is taken from him, right? So we have the eye of Heru, the eye of Usia or Osiris, and the eye of Ra. Why? Because when Heru symbolically was killed spiritually, he resurrects as what? Re Harakati, which is where they get the Jesus story from, where everybody talks about the Jesus story, because he's a manifestation in his resurrection as Re, the sun, the all-seeing eye. And this is why the eye of Ra or Re, the eye of Heru or Horus, and the eye of Osiris and Osea is all connected. It represents the 3 stages. There's also symbolicism there of the 3 degrees of masonry, because now you're getting some of the esoterical teachings, right? And that's why when you look in the eye, sometimes in masonry imposed in the G, in the center of the composite square, you'll see the eye. And you'll see that in the East, the all-seeing eye, they call it the all-seeing eye of the grand architect of the universe, right? Which represents the creator. Because they say in masonry, you don't talk about politics and religion. And because you don't use any specific name in any religion to refer to as the creator, not to offend anybody. So for an example, you won't hear the term Jehovah, Yahweh, Yahuwah, Allah. Right now, every Mason has the right, when they take their oath at the end of degree, in their end of the apprentice degree, you can take it on a sacred text that you came up in. So it doesn't always have to be the Bible. It could be the Quran. It could be the Bhagavad Gita's. It could be whatever. To acknowledge that the grand architect of the universe is a representation of all those things. So Heru has many different representations in his archetype. But really what it is, it's the story of the battle and the war that we go through internally of the higher self and the lower self. And when he activated that Set energy, because it goes even deeper on the occult, because Set represents red blood cells, rebellion, chaos, which one has to ignite in order to bring order out of things. And Haru represents the white blood cells, conformity. And he found out, like even the story with Luke Skywalker, that it wasn't just about the light. He found out the hard way it was the harmonization of light and darkness, which is the example of the architect of Lucifer. Now you can even go into the teachings of a controversial Masonic writer, Albert Pike, who most mainstream Masons will tell you, don't read that. I'd encourage people to read it. Because whether you forget who Albert Pike was, as far as, yes, he was a Confederate. Yes, he grew up in the South. Yes, he was a racist, right? That's the era he grew up in. I get that. I'm not agreeing with who he might have been as a person outside of Masonry, but when you read Morals and Dogmas and some of his writings, you can't deny that he was tapped into something. See, I don't get into all that bullshit, right? And I've read a lot of Albert Pike's work. Man, people have no idea what this is about. Trust me when I tell you. See, the difference of what we do here, we draw upon the knowledge, we resonate. I'm not interested in arguing and debating over what I don't like. There's a lot of shit I don't like, but I don't waste my time debating over it because it's pointless. So Haru's energy and archetype, all archetypes' energy is reflected in the consciousness that they represent. Set deals with making order out of chaos. That's his energy, right? We can go through all of them, right? Even when you go through the primordial gods and goddesses of the draconian path, right? And like I said, people hear the word draconian and dragon, and they think draconian, that's evil, that's dragons and the devil and this. No, the word draconian, as I said in a video I did just a few weeks ago, comes from the Greek word dracos or draco, which means clear. The draconian path is a clear path. That's all it means. But people want to focus on dragons and serpents and snakes, which is connected because it's dealing with the serpent energy, the raising of the kundalini, right? Which the ancient Egyptians wore in their what? What's their headdress called, right? They wore their namuz. And when you look on the namuz of Egypt, you saw the cobra or the serpent. And they wore that right by what? The pineal or the third eye. That was a symbol that they were spiritually, quote unquote, as we would use to term today, woke. The serpent also goes back to Apep, which ties us back into Set and Heru, if you understand the story, and Set's father, Ra. Okay? When you understand in the text of the Book of Gates, now we're getting into the story further because Heru's connected going through those gates. If you're familiar with that story, Ra's journey through the underworld. Who was at the Bark Array navigating the ship through the void and the abyss? Set. Nobody talks about it. Why? Right? Because the story we read in the text is that Ra spent his evenings from dusk till dawn trying to kill Apep. Pay attention. This is the story of you. This is the story of Set, and this is the story of Heru, right? He thought he could kill Apep, right? Now we know Apep represents chaos. They'll tell you in modern day science he was that back in Egypt. He was what we would call the devil today. That's not true. See, people got to stop religifying the ancient mystery teachings of Egypt. Stop always turning it into a Jesus, God, and devil thing. That's to make weak people feel comfortable. Yes, there's a correlation there. I'm not saying there's not, but it goes deeper than that. Okay? Set was at the Bark of Ray navigating the boat through the underworld because he came to his father and said, Pop, you're doing it wrong. Remember I said earlier, if you were paying attention, energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be manipulated. So Ra was trying to destroy something he could not destroy. So the reality is this. The reality is this. Set was, in the story when you read, Set was able to make order out of chaos. That's how he was able to keep Apep at bay. When you continue to read the story, when he steps in, he now harmonizes the chaos, right? So he didn't try to come in and destroy something that couldn't be destroyed. He was able to make harmony and order out of it. Where Ra thought it was about, he could kill it and destroy it because chaos and energy will manifest again. You can't, again, energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be manipulated. That's the science of magic. Set was the great sorcerer, the great dark magician of ancient Egypt, and that's why he was considered evil. Now, if you're familiar with that story in the Book of Gates, as he's going through Ra, he gets to, I believe it's the third gate. And who does he encounter at the third gate? A pep. And he can't get through because a pep won't let him. So who does he summons? He summons the demons and the God, says specifically the demons and spirits of the underworld to help him get through. He later, a few gates down later, encounters a pep again. And this time he can get through with no assistance because it's showing you the number nine, it's showing you he has now grown in his spirituality. He had now obtained the knowledge to get through the gates. Because before the way he was approaching it, he did not have the knowledge, the wisdom, or the understanding. So now as Set steps in and teaches him and shows him the way how to make order out of chaos, now when he encounters a pep for the second time, he can get through on his own. This is your story too. This is symbolic of your journey through the underworld. What is the underworld? It's the deep recesses of your subconscious mind. He was tapping into his astral realms, but did not know how to travel them. Then you might say to yourself, well, don't get spooky now. You might say to yourself, I thought Ra was the most high. Most high of what? Stop. I hate when people correlate the deity Ra to some monotheistic Allah, God, or Jehovah. You're spooked. Stop it. Because how could the son step in and teach the father, right? Because the father should be instructing the son. That's why now when we go back to Set, that's why Set is referred to as the unique one. He's unlike any other deity in ancient Egypt, any other deity. From the appearance of the mask he wore to this day, which nobody can figure out what it is. There's only speculation and theory. Some say it's a jackal. Some say it's a boar. Some say it's this, it's that. It's because it represents chaos. You're not supposed to know officially what it is. But underneath the mask is harmony. So he comes in the form of chaos, not because, people get this twisted, not because Set creates chaos for the individual. No, Set brings up chaos that already exists in the individual so that individual or initiate can deal with it and make harmony out of it. That's why he's called the deity of chaos and the deity of the desert and the storms. Not because he creates the chaos to destroy an individual, he brings it out of the individual and shows them how to make order out of it in order for them to master themselves. He's one of the most misunderstood and most unique deities in Egypt because they correlate him religiously to some satanic devil or Satan in accordance to Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, because they have no idea who Set is. That's the reason why. Okay? That's all. Demetrius, what's going on, brother? Shout out to brother Demetrius. I know I mentioned it in the last video. He's come down the last few years and been a great help at the conference and always imparts his wisdom. Always, a tremendous help. Doesn't just come just to be a participant, but comes to help out, work, and assist. So Demetrius, what we got to do is the next one, man. We need to get together, have you come in and on the next one that I do, and I'd love to have you come in and on our next video and do some insight. But I definitely want to give you a shout out. And those that know. So definitely shout out. But Demetrius says Set was the only one powerful enough to control and direct the current of a pep, 100%. And that's the thing nobody talks about. They always are talking about just negative bullshit or like this mainstream, religious nonsense, right? But yeah, I'm going to get with you, Demetrius. We got to set something up. That next live I do, maybe you can come in on that if you're available. I'm going to check with you your schedule. I want to do something on what I got in mind. I'll talk to you about it. Chaos magic and quantum sorcery. I want to kind of do something in regards to that, but I'm going to go with you on that. It'd be awesome. So yeah, to your question, Jeremiah, yeah, it's a good question, but that applies across the board. But that's what I'm saying. You mentioned a question about Hey Room, and look what it opens the door to, right? So there's so much to look at there that's being, revealed right in front of us, but we just gotta look to see it. And again, in correlation to that whole story with Set, that's what makes Set unique than any other deity. Even according to the story of his birth, he's the only one. Set was so unique, he couldn't even wait for the full birth process. According to the story, what did he do? He ripped himself from the womb of his mother Nut. He couldn't even wait to be born. He's the only one you find that. Outside of Ptah, who according to the pyramid text, was a self-created human being. And people don't know what that means. They say, I don't understand. How did Ptah create himself? Right? Pause for a minute. Outside of that, because now Ptah connects back to Khnum, right? Khnum is the fashioner, the molder of creating. It says Ptah thought himself into existence. Think about that for a minute. You too have thought yourself into existence, right? So let me even simplify it even much simpler for you. So for an example, anything you do, anytime you pause and stop and think about something you got to do, I'm going to use something so basic. All right, say tonight it's late, you're getting ready to go to bed, and you got to run some errands tomorrow, right? And we all do this. So you stop and think, all right, I'm going to get up in the morning, I'm going to go run down to the store. Check this out now. Let me show you. This is what this means to simplify. People spook it. I got to go run to the store. I got to get some fruits. I got to get some vegetables. All right, then after I relieve the store, I'm going to come home, put that away. Then I got to go back out and run over here and do this, that, and the third, right? Now you've already carried that out in your mind. You created the thought. And then tomorrow comes and you actually do what you thought. You just did the same exact thing, whether you're conscious of it or not. That's how magic works. Now, if you could do that in simplistic everyday things in your life, why do you not have the ability then to tap into your magical and sorcery powers? Right? Think about it. Some of you probably even did that while you've been on this live. You thought about, I got to do this tomorrow. Now you've already played it out in your mind. You've played out the whole scenario in your subjective consciousness. And then you're going to get up tomorrow morning and carry your day out. I don't care what it is. That's magic. They know you have the ability to do that. So if you can do that with everyday things in your life, why can you not do it things of a higher spiritual nature? Okay, that's my point. All right, what else we got? I'm gonna take a couple more. I'm gonna have to wrap this up. It's getting late. But yeah, we're definitely gonna do that. Let me double check I don't see anything else here on the YouTube. Let me finalize remember, this is technically a Patreon class. And I'm giving you guys a peek kind of what we do. But let me go back to the Patreon chat and let me see. Let me address them if they have any final questions. Vega, I'm going to get to you in a second. Let me go into chat. So I'm going to finish with these Patreon questions, and then we're going to wrap this up. This is from where is it? Oh shit, Vega Monster. I'm going to get to you in a minute. Maybe that's what you wanted to talk about, but we'll elaborate more. Yes, there is a correlation that you can find documented. Tahuti and Quetzalcoatl. I have that is stuff can be pulled up in books, but hold on, we'll come back. A says, I'm excited for the quantum sorcery class. I read a beginning book about this form of magic. It helps with my visualization skills and building my inner space in my mind. I'm looking forward to building on this more when the class starts. Yeah, that's gonna be starting soon. Quantum sorcery and chaos magic, because there's a great correlation there. And if you understand quantum physics, basically what quantum sorcery and chaos magic is, it's taking quantum physics and combining it with the science of magic and sorcery. And it embodies strong elements. That's why the chaos magic is there. And it's a beautiful thing. Essentially, it is what we do on the path of self-mastery. So yeah, I'm excited for that. We will also have a new sex magic class starting after the holidays on Patreon only. That's something people have been asking for. That's mature audiences only. I'm joking because some people, unfortunately, when that topic still comes up, people are still very immature about it. And that class will be focusing on, ritualistically and spiritually, in addition, outside of just the lustful purposes of it, but it's a combination of both. And we're going to go very in depth on group practices, solo practices, ritualistic practices. So for those, that are looking to go to that level. That's a whole nother level. All right. That's it. Let me bring Vega Monster in. I think that after we bring Vega Monster in, it looks like that will be it. Go ahead, Vega Monster.
Yo. First off, I want to give a shout out to brother Demetrius. What up, Demetrius? I met him in the temple meeting a couple months back when I did the astrology thing. Cool brother. I'd always hear him on the Ravana
Yeah.
meetings and whatnot. Always bring
Yeah.
the most to the table. So yeah, that'll be dope when you get him in on something. But anyways,
Most definitely.
might be a little left field right here, but you were talking about the monotheism, right? And so I don't know if you ever listened to Drink Champs, but
Yes,
I,
I
I was
have.
peeping. I was peeping it the other day, and it was a couple months old. It's the RZA, the one when they had RZA on there, and
I saw it.
he was talking about the. Have you seen that one?
I saw it.
Okay, so
But
he was talking
maybe
about
I didn't see specifically what you're pointing out, but go ahead.
they were talking about the Grave Diggers project, and
Mhm.
he was talking about part of it came to mind when I mean, he's speaking subjectively, of course. I don't know if he's talking about a dream or whatever, but I'm tripping because he's like, he's down with the nation, and he's talking about he was kidnapped by vampires, and then they threw him to the women vampires, and then he became a vampire. So my question through all that is like, do people who are monotheistic practice vampirism?
Look, it's like, well, first let's back up. When you talk about the RZA, you talk about grave diggers. Now, remember, there was a period in hip hop, and you know this probably,
The
probably more than
horrorcore.
most, hardcore, that didn't really catch on. You
Hmm.
also had a group that came out at that time called Flatliners. They were probably a
Yeah,
little
yeah,
bit
yeah.
more, they were a little bit more darker. Now, it was the second Grave Diggers album that really propelled them in '97. The only difference, though, when you look at what the Grave Diggers were talking about, yes, it infused some occult elements in there, but there was
Hmm.
a lot of overtones too of the Nation of Gods and Earths, conscious teachings, which I thought was very unique. And I think that album is a classic. Both of those albums are classic. Now, in relation, I heard RZA talking about that. Yes, you will also find in Father Sebastian's book, he talks about practicing Christians and Catholics who are active vampire practitioners, right? So again, that's in the spectrum of personal. It's no different than somebody. Look at it this way. It's no different than look at a lot of practitioners in Santeria and Ifa in the
Okay.
Caribbean and the United States. Most of them parade on the surface as Christians or Catholics, and they practicing Palo Mayembe, Palo Manto, they're practicing Ifa, they're practicing the dark arts, but then they're going to church every week pretending like they're these Catholics and Christians. So it's the same thing. Yes, it does exist. Is there a lot of them around? I don't know. I've never personally ran into one who's had that experience or is part of that experience. But yes, one can be because one is not limited to the parameters of what those religions teach. Now, that's in complete opposition, obviously, to what their religion teaches, but they have or they have superseded the morals and those certain dogmas that limit them to their religion. So their approach and mentality is not going to be the same as that fundamental Christian who's not going to deviate from their teachings and their rules and their restrictions. So this is a person who has more of a self-mastery approach because they can draw from the principles, say, of Christianity or whatever religion that they have, but they can go outside and supersede the limitations by exploring the world of magic, spirituality, whether that's vampire magic, whether that's Luciferian sorcery, this, that, or the third. It's really an individual thing and it's a mindset, right? So, yes, one can, and it does exist. And again, you can refer to Vampire Magic, Father Sebastian's book. He's actually got a section in there on it, a short section, where he talks about can Christians be vampire magicians? And he said, yeah. And he explains knowing some, personal experience some, and some testimonies from some. So it does exist, 100%. It does
Okay.
exist.
Okay. Cool.
Mhm.
Thank you for that.
Yep. And yeah, I do. I watch Drink Champs when I get a chance. I find it interesting. The only thing sometimes Nori gets on my nerves is shut the fuck up and let people talk. And that sometimes bothers the shit out of me. You know, just let people talk. It's like sometimes he just wants to talk over them and then dropping shit. I mean, he's had some good ones on there, man. Um, yeah, I don't know. I think it was that he had Kane on there, if I'm not mistaken, not too long ago. I'd love to see Rakim get on there, man. But he brings on a wide variety of guests. I mean, if you're a hip hop head and you love the culture, it's a pretty good show. Like I say, if he just would shut the fuck up sometime, you know. So I put that little meme on my Instagram. If you take your bottom lip, I love that clip, and you connect it to your top lip, you will shut the fuck up. Sometimes shutting the fuck up is the best thing you can do. I love that meme, man. It's my favorite. But yeah, I mean, but as you know, RZA, Wu Tang, all of those brothers had strong connects. Papa Wu, who passed away not too long ago, he was actually very influential and he was like, that would be like, who was their teacher that brought them in to the teachings. And they always, upheld him until he transitioned. But yeah, as you can, if you're a Wu Tang fan or you're a fan of all their artists on an individual level too, I mean, they openly talk about their experience with the 5% Nation of Gods and Earths and the teachings and how they were affected. And, it's all in the elements of their music. And as I said before, now when I look at the 120, the 1 to 36, the 1 to 40, the Lost and Found, Supreme Mathematics, Supreme Alphabet, Solar Facts. I mean, that really, and I look at it now from a more esoteric or occult perspective. So I go back through my lessons and I say, damn, there was a lot of shit here. I wasn't looking at it through those lenses I would look at it now, obviously, but that's the reason why. So crazy shit. All right. I think that's going to wrap it up, folks. It's after 11. I'm getting a little tired here. Tired in the sense I got shit I got to do. Hold on. Let me just come over here real quick. Yeah. All right. So again, to sum it up, just to give you a little taste of what we do here on the Patreon page. This is just a little bit. I couldn't go in like I normally would like to or talk about certain things because it's YouTube. But again, you can go to the Patreon page, patreon.com/Baniti, Baniti, tier 3. That's the tier you want to join. That'll give you access to the private class. I do 3 of them every month on Patreon. In addition to a group ritual we do together at the end of the month. So I hope you guys enjoyed this little sneak peek at Patreon. There was a last minute thing. I wasn't even going to do this, but I said, let's do this. I never really did it. Let's get the word out there and we'll go from there. All right. So listen, I appreciate everybody. I appreciate you guys tuning in. I will try to look at a date to set that next live up. As you know me, sometimes it's last moment. I'm going to try to squeeze it in when I get an opening before the year's out because I like to take a break, as you know, for the holidays. And then we'll go from there. Other than that, I appreciate you guys tuning in. Infernal blessings, and we will talk soon. We stop recording.